The glass shattered at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and with it, Sierra Langford's entire world. One moment she was the untouchable CEO of Langford Industries, commanding boardrooms with a single glance. The next, she was trapped in twisted metal, her spine crushed, her future erased. 6 months later, she sits motionless in her corner office, staring at a city that once bowed to her name, now unable to take a single step toward it. The doctors say she'll never walk again. Her board says it's time to step down. But when a quiet janitor kneels beside her wheelchair one cold November night and whispers, "I'll help you walk," something impossible begins to stir. This is the story of two people the world had written off, and the miracle that happened when they refused to give up on each other. Stay with me until the end, and please comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime that echoed through the empty 42nd floor of Langford Tower. Noah Brandt pushed his cleaning cart forward, the wheels squeaking against the polished marble, breaking the cathedral-like silence of the executive suite. It was 10:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and the building was a ghost town, exactly how he preferred it. Most nights Noah moved through these halls like a shadow, invisible and deliberate. He'd scrub the floors, empty the trash bins, wipe down the conference tables where million-dollar deals were made, and disappear before dawn. In his gray janitor's uniform with N. Brandt stitched above the pocket, he was part of the building's infrastructure, as essential and unnoticed as the air conditioning. But tonight felt different. The lights in the CEO's office were still on. Noah paused outside the glass walls, his hand tightening around the handle of his mop. Through the transparent barriers, he could see her, Sierra Langford, the woman whose face graced the covers of Fortune and Forbes, whose name was synonymous with power and precision. She sat in her wheelchair, positioned before the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the glittering expanse of the city. She hadn't moved. She might not have even blinked. For a moment, Noah considered walking past. It wasn't his place. He'd been working this building for 3 years, and the unspoken rule was clear. The executive floor was to be cleaned without interaction, without intrusion, without acknowledgement that real people existed in these spaces. But something about the stillness in that office felt wrong. It wasn't the stillness of concentration or contemplation. It was the stillness of someone drowning in deep water, too exhausted to even thrash. Noah made a decision that would change both their lives. He knocked gently on the glass door. No response. He knocked again, louder this time, and saw her head turn slightly, just a fraction of movement, as if even that small gesture required immense effort. "Ms. Langford?" His voice was soft, respectful. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm just here to clean. Should I come back later?" For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice that sounded like it had been scraped raw, "Do whatever you want. I'm not here anyway." Noah blinked. "Ma'am?" "I'm a ghost," she said flatly, still facing the window. "Ghosts don't have opinions about cleaning schedules." He should have left it at that. Should have nodded, cleaned quietly, and disappeared. But Noah had spent the last 4 years of his life learning to hear the things people didn't say. The exhaustion behind "I'm fine," the fear behind "I don't need help," the desperation behind "leave me alone." He'd heard those same tones in his own voice after his wife died, leaving him with a 3-year-old daughter and a mountain of grief he had no idea how to climb. "Ghosts don't usually work this late," Noah said gently, pushing his cart into the office. "Must be some unfinished business keeping you here." Sierra's head turned fully now, and for the first time, Noah saw her face clearly. The photographs didn't do her justice, or rather, they'd captured only one dimension of her. Yes, she was beautiful in that sharp, untouchable way that powerful women often were. High cheekbones, intelligent green eyes, dark hair pulled back with severe precision. But what the photographs missed was the exhaustion carved into every line of her face, the shadows under her eyes that spoke of countless sleepless nights, and something else. Something that made Noah's chest tighten with recognition. Absolute soul-crushing defeat. "You're new," she said, though her tone suggested she didn't actually care. 3 years isn't that new. I've never seen you before." "That's kind of the point of my job, ma'am. I'm supposed to be invisible." Sierra made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something breaking. "Then you're doing it wrong. I can see you perfectly clearly." Noah smiled slightly. Maybe you're looking harder than usual. Maybe I've run out of other things to look at. She turned back to the window, and Noah began his work, moving methodically around the office. He emptied the trash can, full of crumpled papers and what looked like medication bottles. He wiped down her desk, careful not to disturb the neat stacks of reports and contracts. He ran the vacuum cleaner over the carpet, the sound filling the silence between them. All the while, he watched her from the corner of his eye. She sat so still. Too still. Like she was afraid that any movement might shatter whatever fragile thing was holding her together. 6 months, she said suddenly. Noah looked up from where he was cleaning the small kitchenette area. Ma'am? You're wondering how long I've been like this? Everyone does. They just don't have the courage to ask. She gestured vaguely at her wheelchair. 6 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days. Since the accident. I wasn't wondering, Noah said truthfully, but I'm sorry that happened to you. Are you? Her voice was sharp now, challenging. Or are you sorry you have to watch me sit here like a broken doll? There's a difference. Noah set down his cleaning spray and turned to face her fully. I'm sorry because you look like someone who's given up, and that's the worst kind of accident, the one that happens after the actual accident is over. Sierra's eyes widened slightly. No one spoke to her like that. No one had spoken to her with anything but careful, pitying politeness since the night her car had spun out on the rain-slicked highway, since the 18-wheeler had turned her Mercedes into a coffin of twisted metal and shattered glass. You don't know anything about me, she said, but there was less venom in it than she'd intended. You're right, I don't. Noah returned to his work, spraying and wiping the glass coffee table. But I know what giving up looks like. I've seen it in the mirror enough times. Oh, here we go. Sierra's laugh was bitter. The inspirational janitor. Did you rehearse this? Look at me, I've had struggles too, but I'm so noble and humble that I clean toilets with a smile. Noah didn't flinch. My wife died 4 years ago. Brain aneurysm. She was 28. Dropped dead while making breakfast. My daughter was 3. For 6 months after that, I gave up. Completely. I stopped showering, stopped eating, stopped being a father. My little girl would cry herself to sleep every night, and I'd just sit there in the dark, staring at nothing. Sierra's expression shifted, the armor cracking just slightly. So no, ma'am, I didn't rehearse this. And I'm not noble. I'm just a guy who knows what rock bottom looks like from both sides, the falling and the climbing back up. Silence stretched between them, thick and complicated. How did you... Sierra's voice was quieter now. How did you climb back up? Noah smiled, but it was a sad smile. One morning, my daughter, Lila, she came into my room. She was holding this drawing she'd made. It was just scribbles, you know, the way kids draw. But she told me it was me and her, holding hands in the sunshine. And she said, Daddy, can we go outside today? I miss the sunshine. He paused, remembering. I realized she'd been living in the dark with me, and she didn't even understand why. She didn't deserve that. So I got up. I made her breakfast. I took her to the park, and the next day I did it again. And the day after that. Not because I wanted to, not because I felt better, but because she needed me to. Sierra's hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair, her knuckles white. I don't have a daughter who needs me. No, Noah agreed. But you've got a whole company full of people who do. I hear them sometimes, you know, the employees working late. They talk about you. Some of them are scared you won't come back. Some are scared you will, but all of them are stuck in the dark with you, waiting to see if the sun's ever going to come back up. They don't need me, Sierra whispered. They have Wilson. He's been running things since... She gestured vaguely at herself again. Wilson's your CFO, right? Guy with the perfect hair and the laugh that sounds like a cash register? Despite herself, Sierra almost smiled. That's actually a perfect description. He's keeping the lights on, Noah said, but that's not the same as leading. That's not the same as being the person who makes people believe something's possible. I can't even walk, Sierra said, and for the first time her voice cracked. I can't stand up. I can't cross a room. I can't do something as simple and basic as walk from here to there. How am I supposed to lead anyone when I can't even lead my own body to follow orders? Noah moved closer, kneeling beside her wheelchair so they were at eye level. It was a bold move, presumptuous even, but something told him she needed to see his eyes when he said this. "What if you could?" Sierra stared at him. "What?" "What if you could walk again?" The doctors said, "I know what doctors say. They said my wife's death was instantaneous, that she didn't suffer. They were trying to be kind, but kind isn't always the same as right, and sometimes doctors are just making their best guess based on statistics and textbooks." "It's not about guessing," Sierra said, frustration rising in her voice. "I have a spinal injury, L1, L2 compression fracture with neurological involvement. I've had 3 surgeries, months of physical therapy. The best specialists in the country have examined me. The prognosis is unanimous. What if they're wrong?" The question hung in the air between them. "They're not," Sierra said, but her voice wavered. "Okay, but what if they are? What if there's even a 1% chance they're wrong? Would you want to know? Would you want to try?" Sierra's eyes were suddenly bright with tears she refused to let fall. "Don't do this. Don't come in here and dangle hope in front of me like it's some kind of prize I can win if I just believe hard enough. That's cruel. That's worse than cruelty." "I'm not talking about belief," Noah said firmly. "I'm talking about work. Hard, painful, frustrating work. I'm talking about showing up every single day, even when you don't want to, even when it feels impossible, and doing the work anyway. You don't understand. You're right. I don't understand what it's like to lose the use of my legs, but I understand what it's like to lose the thing that defined you. When my wife died, I lost my identity as a husband. I lost my future. I lost the person I thought I was supposed to be. And for a long time, I thought that meant I was just done, that the story was over." He paused. "But then I realized something. The story's only over when you stop writing it. Everything else is just a plot twist." Sierra laughed, but it came out as a sob. "That's the worst motivational speech I've ever heard. Good thing I'm a janitor and not a motivational speaker." For a moment, they just looked at each other. 2 people who'd been knocked down by life in different ways, sitting in a dark office high above a city that never stopped moving, never stopped demanding, never stopped pushing forward. "I'll help you," Noah said quietly. "Help me what?" "Walk again." Sierra shook her head. "You can't." "Maybe not. Probably not. But what if we tried anyway? What if we spent the next few months working as hard as we possibly can, and at the end of it, you're still in this chair? At least you'd know. At least you'd know you didn't give up." "I've already tried. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, every kind of therapy." "With me," Noah interrupted. "Try with me. No doctors, no therapists with clipboards and pity in their eyes. Just you, me, and the work. Every morning before your executives show up. Every evening after they leave. As long as it takes." "Why?" Sierra's voice broke on the word. "Why would you do this? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Why would you sacrifice your time?" "Because someone did it for me," Noah said simply. "After my wife died, my neighbor, this old guy named Marcus, he started showing up at my door every morning. He'd make me coffee. He'd sit with Lila while I showered. He'd talk to me about nothing, about everything. And one day I asked him why. You know what he said?" Sierra shook her head. He said, "Because I can. Because you need it. Because tomorrow, when you're back on your feet, you'll do the same for someone else. That's how we survive. We carry each other." A tear finally escaped, sliding down Sierra's cheek. She wiped it away angrily. "I'm not used to needing to be carried." "I know, but everyone needs it sometimes. Even CEOs. Maybe especially CEOs." Sierra was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. Noah could see the war happening behind her eyes. Pride versus desperation, fear versus hope, the safe certainty of defeat versus the terrifying possibility of trying again. Finally, she looked up at him. "If we do this, and I'm not saying we will, but if we do this, I have conditions." "Okay." "No one can know. Not the board, not my executives, not the media. This stays between us." "Agreed." "And if I tell you to stop, you stop. No pushing, no one more rep, no motivational speeches about never giving up. My body, my rules." Fair enough. And she hesitated. And you have to promise me something. What? If this doesn't work, when this doesn't work, you won't look at me like everyone else does, like I'm broken, like I'm something to be pitied. Noah held her gaze steadily. Miss Langford, I've been cleaning this building for 3 years. I've scrubbed your floors, emptied your trash, wiped down your desk. You want to know what I see when I look at you? What? Someone who built an empire before she turned 35. Someone who employs 3,000 people and provides them with health care, salaries, purpose. Someone who donates millions to charity every year. Someone who changed an entire industry. He paused. The wheelchair doesn't change any of that. It doesn't define you. It's just something you're sitting in right now. Sierra's breath caught. It was the first time in 6 months anyone had talked about her as something other than her injury. So, Noah said, standing up. Do we have a deal? Sierra looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly, she extended her hand. Noah shook it, and in that moment, both of them felt something shift, not just in the office, but in the very trajectory of their lives. Tomorrow morning, Sierra said, 6 a.m., before anyone else arrives. I'll be here. Noah returned to his cleaning cart, finishing the rest of his work in comfortable silence. Sierra watched him move around her office with quiet efficiency, and for the first time in months, the weight on her chest felt slightly lighter. As Noah was preparing to leave, Sierra called out, "Wait!" He turned back. "What's your name? Your real name, not just the initial on your shirt." Noah. Noah Brandt. Noah. She tested the name, nodding slowly. I'm Sierra. I know. He smiled slightly. It's on the door. Right. She almost laughed. Sorry, I'm not usually this human. I was going to say vulnerable. They're the same thing, Ms. Langford. Sierra, she corrected. If you're going to see me fall apart repeatedly for the next few months, you might as well call me Sierra. All right then, Sierra. Noah pushed his cart toward the elevator. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to hurt. After he left, Sierra sat in the darkness of her office for a long time, staring at her hands. They were shaking slightly, not from weakness, but from something she'd almost forgotten existed. Fear. Not the dull, numbing fear of permanent defeat, but the sharp electric fear of someone standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump, not knowing if there's water below or rocks. Hope, she realized, was terrifying. She wheeled herself to the window one more time, looking down at the city. Somewhere down there, Noah was heading home to his daughter. Somewhere down there, 3,000 employees were sleeping, unaware that their CEO had just made a decision that might change everything, or might change nothing at all. Sierra took a deep breath and whispered to her reflection in the glass. Okay, let's see if I can do this. The city lights glittered back at her, offering no answers, only possibilities. The next morning, Noah arrived at 5:45 a.m. He'd barely slept, his mind racing through everything he knew about physical therapy, rehabilitation, and recovery. He'd spent half the night researching spinal injuries on his phone while Lila slept beside him, her small hand clutching his shirt. He'd also spent half the night wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a physical therapist. He was a janitor with a high school diploma and a belief that will could sometimes override biology. But he'd made a promise, and Noah Brandt didn't break promises. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, he saw that the lights in Sierra's office were already on. She was there, wearing athletic clothes instead of her usual power suits, her face set in an expression of grim determination. Noah wheeled his cart to the side and approached her office. She'd moved to the center of the room, where she'd somehow arranged a yoga mat and some resistance bands. You're early, he said. I haven't been able to sleep past 4 a.m. since the accident, she replied. Might as well put the time to use. Noah nodded, assessing the space. We're going to start small, so small you'll probably think it's pointless. I'm already sitting in a wheelchair. My entire existence feels pointless. Then this should feel right at home. He knelt beside her. Today we're just going to work on muscle activation. Just getting your body to remember it has legs. Sierra's jaw tightened. I'm aware I have legs, Noah. I can feel them. They just don't work. Can you move your toes? Sometimes, a little. Show me. Sierra stared down at her feet, her face contorting with concentration. After a moment, Noah saw the smallest flicker of movement in her right big toe. Good, he said. That's good. That means the nerve pathways aren't completely severed. There's still connection there. The doctors said, I don't care what the doctors said. Noah's voice was firm but not unkind. I care what your body says. And your body just said it can move. Let's see what else it can say. For the next hour, they worked. Noah guided Sierra through a series of exercises that felt absurdly simple. Contracting and releasing muscles, attempting to flex her ankles, trying to engage her core. Every movement was slow, deliberate, and exhausting. By the time Noah's watch beeped at 7 a.m., Sierra was drenched in sweat, her face flushed with effort and frustration. That's it for today, Noah said. We barely did anything, Sierra protested. We did exactly what we needed to do. Your muscles need time to recover, and you need to get ready for work. I'm not going anywhere. Wilson's handling everything. Noah frowned. You're still coming to the office every day? Where else would I go? My apartment is just another prison. At least here I can pretend I'm useful. You are useful, but hiding up here in an empty office at 6 a.m. isn't the same as being present. Sierra's eyes flashed. I didn't ask for a life coach. No, you asked for help walking. But walking isn't just about legs, Sierra. It's about having somewhere to walk to, something to walk toward. Before she could respond, they heard the elevator chime, the sound of other executives beginning to arrive for the day. Noah quickly moved back to his cleaning cart. Same time tomorrow? Sierra nodded, her expression unreadable. Same time. As Noah left, Sierra wheeled herself to her desk and began the process of transforming back into the untouchable CEO the world expected. She pulled her hair back, applied makeup to hide the exhaustion, and arranged her face into the mask of competence she'd worn for so many years. But something was different now. There was a small spark in her chest that hadn't been there yesterday. It wasn't hope, not yet. But it was possibility. And for someone who'd been living in certainty of defeat, possibility felt revolutionary. Thus, the routine established itself over the following weeks. Every morning at 6 a.m., Noah would arrive with his cleaning cart as cover. They'd work for an hour, stretching, contracting, engaging muscles that had forgotten their purpose. Then Noah would disappear, and Sierra would prepare for a day of conference calls and strategic meetings she attended mostly in silence. The progress was microscopic. Some days Sierra could wiggle 3 toes instead of 1. Some days she could hold a contraction for 3 seconds instead of 2. Some days there was no progress at all, and she'd wheel herself away from Noah in frustration, angry tears streaming down her face. On those days, Noah would simply clean the office silently, giving her space while staying present. He'd learned that sometimes the most important thing you could do for someone was just not leave. 3 weeks into their arrangement, something changed. They were working through their usual routine when Noah noticed Sierra staring at her right leg with an expression of intense concentration. What? He asked. I felt something, not just the muscle contracting. I felt... She looked up at him, her eyes wide. I felt it move, really move, like I told it to move and it listened. Noah knelt beside her. Try again. Sierra's entire body tensed with effort, and there, a visible flexion in her quadriceps muscle. Small, but undeniable. Did you see that? Her voice was trembling. I saw it. Oh my God. Sierra pressed her hands to her face. Oh my God, I'm not imagining this, right? You saw it too? I saw it, Sierra. She burst into tears. Not the frustrated tears of the past weeks, but something else entirely. Relief. Shock. The first fragile threads of hope weaving themselves into something stronger. Noah sat back on his heels, his own chest tight with emotion. This is just the beginning, he said quietly. You know that, right? This is going to get harder before it gets easier. I don't care. Sierra wiped her eyes, her voice fierce. I don't care if it takes years. I don't care if it's the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm getting out of this chair, Noah. I'm walking again. Yeah, Noah said, smiling. I think you are. From that day forward, their sessions intensified. Sierra pushed herself relentlessly, often to the point where Noah had to physically stop her from overdoing it. She'd arrive at 6 a.m. already warmed up, having spent the previous evening doing exercises in her apartment. She'd stay late after work, practicing in her office long after everyone else had gone home. One evening, about 5 weeks into their training, Noah brought Lila with him. His regular babysitter had canceled, and he couldn't afford to miss a session, not when Sierra was making such remarkable progress. "I'm sorry," he said as he wheeled his cart off the elevator, his 4-year-old daughter's hand clasped firmly in his. "It's just for tonight. She'll be quiet, I promise." But Lila, seeing Sierra in her wheelchair, immediately broke free from Noah's grasp and ran straight toward her. "Are you a princess?" Lila asked, her eyes wide. Sierra blinked, completely thrown off balance. "What?" "You're sitting in a throne," Lila explained, pointing at the wheelchair. "Only princesses sit in thrones." Noah moved to intercept his daughter. "Lila, sweetie, come back here. Ms. Langford is busy." "It's fine," Sierra said, and to her own surprise, she meant it. She looked down at the little girl with dark curls and her father's kind eyes. "I'm not a princess, but this isn't a throne, it's a wheelchair." "Why are you in a wheelchair?" "Lila," Noah warned. But Sierra shook her head. "No, it's okay." She looked at Lila seriously. "I was in an accident and it hurt my back. Now I can't walk." Oh. Lila processed this information with the remarkable adaptability of children. "My mommy can't walk either. She's in heaven." The office went very quiet. "I know," Sierra said softly. "Your daddy told me. I'm very sorry." Lila shrugged, a gesture too adult for such a small person. "It's okay. Daddy says she's watching us from the clouds. That's why I wave at airplanes." Sierra felt something crack open in her chest. "That's beautiful." "Are you learning to walk?" Lila asked. "Is that why Daddy comes here? He helps people. He helped me remember how to smile after Mommy went to heaven." Noah's eyes were suddenly bright. "Lila, honey." "Yeah," Sierra interrupted, her voice thick. "He's helping me remember how to walk. Your daddy is very good at helping people." Lila beamed. "I know. He's the best daddy in the whole world." She looked at Sierra critically. "Do you want to see my drawing? I drawed it in the car." Before Sierra could answer, Lila had pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her small backpack. It was a child's drawing. Stick figures with triangle dresses and circle heads, all holding hands under a smiling sun. "That's me," Lila pointed. "That's Daddy, and that's you." Sierra stared at the drawing. "How did you know what I look like?" "Daddy showed me a picture on his phone. He said you were working really hard, and we should be proud of you." Sierra looked up at Noah, who had the grace to look embarrassed. "She asked why I was researching spinal injuries at 3 in the morning, he explained. "I didn't want to lie to her." For the first time in months, Sierra felt herself genuinely smile. "Well, thank you for including me in your family portrait, Lila." "You're welcome. Can I watch you practice walking?" "Lila," Noah started, but Sierra cut him off. "Actually, I'd like that." She looked at Noah. "If that's okay with you?" Noah hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but we keep it short tonight. It's past her bedtime." What followed was one of the most extraordinary hours of Sierra's life. With Lila sitting cross-legged on the yoga mat, clapping and cheering for every tiny movement, Sierra found herself pushing harder than she had in weeks. There was something about the child's uncomplicated faith, her absolute certainty that Sierra would walk. That made it feel possible in a way no amount of medical research ever had. "You can do it," Lila shouted when Sierra managed to lift her right leg an inch off the mat. "You're so strong." By the time Noah finally carried a sleeping Lila back to the elevator, Sierra was exhausted, sweaty, and happier than she'd been since before the accident. "Same time tomorrow?" Noah asked. Sierra nodded, but then added, "Noah, thank you for all of this, for believing in me when no one else did." "You're doing the hard part," he replied. "I'm just showing up." "That's more than most people do." After they left, Sierra sat alone in her office, thinking about the drawing Lila had left behind. 3 stick figures holding hands. A family that wasn't quite a family, but something close, something warm. She'd spent so many years building Langford Industries, pouring every ounce of herself into quarterly reports and market share and shareholder value. She'd sacrificed relationships, friendships, and any semblance of work-life balance to become the youngest female CEO in her industry. And it had all felt worthwhile, until the accident showed her how fragile it all was, how quickly everything could be taken away, how little any of it mattered when you couldn't even stand up to reach the coffee pot. But maybe, she thought, maybe there was another way to measure success. Maybe it wasn't just about building empires. Maybe it was also about the connections you made along the way, the lives you touched, the hands you held. Sierra looked down at her legs, willing them to move. And for the first time, she didn't just want to walk for herself. She wanted to walk for Noah, who'd sacrificed his evenings to help her. For Lila, who'd drawn her into their family portrait with such casual certainty. She wanted to walk so she could show them that their faith hadn't been misplaced, that the hours they'd invested in her had meant something. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she'd push even harder. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning, 8 weeks after that first conversation in Sierra's office. Noah arrived at 5:50 a.m. to find Sierra already on the mat, her face set with determination that bordered on obsession. "I want to try standing today," she announced before he'd even set down his bag. Noah studied her carefully. They'd been building toward this moment for weeks, strengthening her core, working on balance exercises while seated, gradually preparing her body for the monumental task of supporting its own weight. But wanting something and being ready for it were two different things. "Sierra, we talked about this. We need to—" "I know what we talked about." Her voice was sharp with frustration. "Gradual progression, patience, listening to my body. I've been listening for 8 weeks, Noah. And you know what my body is telling me? It's telling me it's time to try." Noah knelt beside her, meeting her eyes. "And what if you try and you can't do it? What if your legs buckle and you fall?" "Then I'll fall." Sierra's jaw was set. "But at least I'll have tried. At least I'll know." There was something different in her expression today, a fierce, almost reckless determination that both worried and impressed him. This was the woman who'd built a multi-billion-dollar company by the age of 34, who'd never accepted no as a final answer, who'd bulldozed through every obstacle life had thrown at her, until the accident had thrown an obstacle she couldn't bulldoze through. "All right," Noah said finally, "but we do this my way, slow, controlled. And if I say stop, you stop. Deal?" "Deal." Noah helped Sierra transfer from her wheelchair to the mat, then positioned himself directly in front of her. "We're going to use the parallel bars. I had them installed yesterday, told maintenance it was for office renovations." Sierra's eyes widened as she noticed, for the first time, the 2 waist-high bars that had been set up on the far side of her office. "You did that for me." "I did that for us," Noah corrected. "This is a team effort, remember?" He helped Sierra scoot across the floor to the bars, an undignified process that would have mortified her months ago, but now she barely noticed. Her entire focus was on those bars, on the possibility they represented. With Noah's help, Sierra gripped the bars, one hand on each side. They were cool beneath her palms, solid and unyielding. "Okay," Noah said, positioning himself behind her, his hands ready to support her waist. "On 3, you're going to engage your core. Remember the exercises we've been doing, and push up with your arms. Let your legs follow. Don't force them, just let them remember what they're supposed to do." Sierra nodded, her breathing already accelerating. 1, Noah counted. 2, 3. Sierra pushed with every ounce of strength she had. Her arms trembled with effort, her core muscles screaming in protest. And then, impossibly, miraculously, she felt her body rise. For 3 seconds, she was upright. Her feet were on the ground. Her legs were beneath her, shaking violently but holding. She was standing. And then her left knee buckled, and she would have crashed to the floor if Noah hadn't been there, his arms catching her, lowering her gently back to the mat. "I did it!" Sierra gasped, her entire body shaking. "Noah, I did it. I stood up." "You did." His voice was thick with emotion. "You absolutely did." Sierra pressed her face against his shoulder, and Noah felt her tears soaking through his shirt. But these weren't tears of frustration or despair. These were tears of something he'd been hoping to see in her for weeks. Victory. 3 seconds, she said, pulling back to look at him, her face radiant despite the tears. That's not nothing, right? That's something. That's everything, Noah said. That's proof. That's your body telling you it remembers how to do this. They tried again, and again, and again. Each time, Sierra managed to hold herself upright for a few precious seconds before her legs gave out. Each time, Noah was there to catch her, to lower her safely, to encourage her to try once more. By the time 7 o'clock rolled around, Sierra was completely spent, her body drenched in sweat, her arms trembling from the effort of holding the bars. But her eyes were alive with something Noah hadn't seen since the first night they'd met. Hope. Real, tangible, undeniable hope. I have to go, Noah said reluctantly, checking his watch. Lila's bus comes at 7:30, and I need to get her ready for school. Sierra nodded, still catching her breath. Noah? Thank you. I know I say that a lot, but I don't think you understand what this means to me. I think I do. He smiled. Same time tomorrow? Tomorrow I want to try holding it for 5 seconds. Slow down, superstar. Let's not... 5 seconds, Noah. Her eyes blazed with determination. If I can do 3, I can do 5. Noah laughed, shaking his head. You're impossible, you know that? That's what Forbes said in their profile last year, right before they called me one of the most driven CEOs in America. Well, they weren't wrong. Noah gathered his things. But remember, determination is good, but rest is essential. Your body needs time to recover. After Noah left, Sierra sat on the mat for a long moment, just breathing, just feeling. Her legs were useless again, as unresponsive as they'd been for the past 6 months. But now she knew something she hadn't known before. They could work. They could hold her weight. They could stand. It was a beginning. Sierra transferred back to her wheelchair and made her way to her desk, where a stack of reports awaited her review. But for the first time in months, work felt secondary. The reports, the quarterly projections, the merger negotiations, they all seemed distant, abstract, far less important than the 3 seconds she'd just spent standing on her own 2 feet. Her phone buzzed. A text from Wilson, her CFO. Board meeting at 9. Your presence requested but not required. Can handle it if you prefer. Sierra stared at the message. For the past 6 months, she'd let Wilson handle everything. She'd hidden in her office, participated in meetings via video call, and generally acted like a ghost haunting her own company. But something had shifted today. Standing up, even for 3 seconds, had reminded her of who she used to be, who she still was, underneath the wheelchair and the fear and the defeat. She typed back, I'll be there, in person. There was a long pause, then, Are you sure? Sierra looked down at her legs, remembering the feeling of weight on them, of muscles engaging, of her body obeying her will for those 3 precious seconds. I'm sure. 2 hours later, Sierra wheeled herself into the boardroom for the first time since the accident. The reaction was immediate and uncomfortable. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. People stared, then looked away, then looked back, unsure where to direct their eyes. Wilson stood quickly, professional concern on his face. Sierra, I didn't think... We could have brought the materials to your office. I'm tired of my office, Sierra said crisply, wheeling herself to her usual spot at the head of the table. Let's begin. The meeting was awkward at first. People spoke carefully, their voices pitched with the special tone reserved for the sick and injured. They asked if she needed anything, if she was comfortable, if the room temperature was okay. Sierra endured it for 15 minutes before she'd had enough. All right, everyone stop. Her voice cut through the careful politeness like a knife. I'm in a wheelchair, not in a coma. My spine is injured, not my brain. So let's dispense with the kid gloves and talk about the actual state of this company. The room fell silent. Wilson cleared his throat. Sierra, we're just trying to... I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to be kind, and I appreciate it. But what I need right now isn't kindness, it's honesty. So someone tell me, honestly, what's happening with the Meridian acquisition. Another silence. Then Marcus Chen, the head of strategic development, spoke up. It's stalled. Meridian's board is concerned about the leadership transition. They're not sure if he stopped, clearly uncomfortable. If I'm fit to lead this company, Sierra finished for him. That's what you were going to say, isn't it? Marcus nodded reluctantly. Sierra leaned forward. Then we need to show them I am. Wilson, set up a meeting with Meridian's CEO. In person. I'll fly to San Francisco next week. Sierra, are you sure that's... I'm sure. She looked around the table, making eye contact with each person. I know the past 6 months have been difficult. For me, obviously, but also for all of you. You've been running this company without clear leadership, without knowing if I was coming back or if you should start looking for new jobs. That's my fault. I checked out. I gave up. But I'm back now, and I need you all to understand something. She paused, her voice strengthening. This wheelchair doesn't define me. It's something I'm sitting in right now, but it's not who I am. I'm still the CEO of this company. I'm still the person who built Langford Industries from the ground up. And I'm still going to lead us through this acquisition and every other challenge that comes our way. Clear? Around the table, heads nodded. And for the first time since the accident, Sierra saw something shift in people's eyes. The pity was being replaced by something else. Respect. The meeting continued for another hour, and Sierra participated fully, her mind sharp, her instincts as precise as they'd ever been. By the time it ended, she felt exhausted but exhilarated. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be in command, to be engaged, to be present in her own life. As everyone filed out, Wilson lingered behind. That was good, he said quietly. Really good. It's nice to have you back. It's nice to be back. Sierra meant it. Wilson, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Of course. Did you think I was done? Did you think I'd never come back? Wilson was quiet for a moment. I thought you were drowning, he said finally, and I didn't know how to throw you a life preserver. Someone did, Sierra said. Someone threw me a life preserver when I needed it most. Who? Sierra smiled slightly. Someone who reminds me that sometimes the help we need comes from unexpected places. That evening, Noah arrived at his usual time to find Sierra still in the boardroom, reviewing contracts. You're not in your office, he observed. Observation skills of a detective, Sierra teased. I attended a board meeting today, in person. Noah's eyebrows rose. How did it go? Better than expected. Worse than I hoped, but I did it. She looked at him. I stood up this morning, and it made me want to stand up in other ways too. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Noah began setting up for their evening session. But don't overdo it. Physical recovery and emotional recovery need to pace each other. When did you become a philosopher? When I started spending my evenings with a CEO who asks impossible questions. They worked together until after 8, Sierra pushing herself to stand for longer periods, Noah providing support and encouragement. At one point, she managed to hold herself upright for 7 full seconds, and the joy on her face made Noah's chest tighten. I'm going to walk, she said, her voice filled with wonder. Not someday, not maybe, not hopefully. I'm going to walk, Noah. I can feel it. Then we'll make it happen. Noah helped her back to her wheelchair. But remember, Matza, patience, gradual progression, listening to my body. Sierra recited the mantra he'd been drilling into her for weeks. I know, but Noah? I'm tired of being patient. I've been patient for 6 months. I want to move forward. We are moving forward. Standing for 7 seconds when you couldn't stand at all 2 months ago? That's not patience. That's progress. Sierra knew he was right, but the frustration still gnawed at her. She wanted more. She wanted to walk down the hallway, to climb stairs, to move through the world without wheels beneath her. She wanted her life back. The following weeks blurred together in a pattern of work and recovery, progress and setbacks. Some days, Sierra could stand for 15 seconds. Other days, her legs refused to cooperate at all, and she'd wheel herself away in tears while Noah cleaned quietly, giving her space to grieve the person she used to be. The board meeting had changed something, though. Sierra started attending more meetings in person, started engaging with her executives, started reclaiming her role as CEO. The whispers about her stepping down quieted. The pitying glances transformed into something closer to admiration. But the real progress happened in those early mornings and late evenings, in the private space where Sierra fought to reclaim her body, while Noah stood witness to every victory and every defeat. One evening, about 12 weeks into their routine, Noah brought Lila with him again. The 4-year-old burst into Sierra's office with her usual enthusiasm, carrying a new drawing. Miss Sierra! Miss Sierra! Look what I made! This drawing was more elaborate than the last. The same 3 stick figures, but now they were standing in front of what appeared to be a building with many windows. That's your office, Lila explained proudly, because Daddy says you're getting stronger every day and soon you won't need the special chair anymore. Sierra's throat tightened. Did he now? Uh-huh. He says you're very brave. Are you brave, Miss Sierra? Sierra looked at Noah, who had the grace to look embarrassed. I don't know if I'm brave, Lila. Most days I just feel scared. That's what brave means, Lila said matter-of-factly. Daddy told me. He said Mommy was brave because she went to heaven even though she didn't want to leave us. And he's brave because he takes care of me even when he's sad. And you're brave because you try to walk even when it's really hard. Out of the mouths of babes, Sierra thought. You're a very smart little girl. I know. Lila climbed onto one of the office chairs, spinning herself around. Can I watch you practice? I'll be super quiet. You don't have to be quiet, Sierra said. Actually, I'd like it if you talk to me. It helps. What followed was one of the most remarkable evenings yet, with Lila chattering about her day at preschool, telling stories about her friends and her teacher and the butterfly they'd seen at recess. Sierra found herself standing longer than she ever had before. 12 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. You're doing it, Lila squealed. You're standing so long. And then something extraordinary happened. Sierra, gripping the parallel bars with white knuckles, felt her right foot shift forward. Just an inch. Maybe less. But it moved. She'd made it move. Noah, she breathed, did you see? I saw it. His voice was thick with emotion. Sierra's left foot followed, another tiny shift forward. It wasn't walking, not really. It was more like controlled falling. But it was movement. It was progress. It was impossible, made possible. She managed 2 more tiny shifts before her legs gave out and Noah caught her, lowering her gently to the mat. Sierra was laughing and crying at the same time, her body shaking with exhaustion and exhilaration. I moved my feet, I took steps. They were terrible, awful, barely their steps, but they were steps. Lila clapped her hands. You did it. You walked. Not quite walked, Sierra said, but she couldn't stop smiling. But it's a start. Noah knelt beside her, his own eyes bright. It's more than a start, Sierra. It's proof that everything we've been doing is working. Your body is remembering. How long? Sierra asked urgently. How long until I can really walk? Not just shift my feet, but actually walk. I don't know, Noah said honestly. Could be weeks, could be months, but it'll happen. I know it will. After Noah took Lila home, Sierra stayed in her office late into the night, practicing the tiny weight shifts they'd discovered. Each small movement felt like a miracle, like her body was slowly waking from a long sleep. Around midnight, she finally returned to her wheelchair, exhausted but unable to stop smiling. She pulled out her phone and, on impulse, sent Noah a text. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I'd given up on myself. His response came quickly. You never gave up. You just forgot temporarily. There's a difference. Sierra stared at the message for a long time, something warm blooming in her chest. It wasn't just gratitude, though she felt plenty of that. It was something deeper, more complicated. Noah had seen her at her absolute lowest and hadn't looked away. He'd seen her broken and hadn't treated her like she was less. He'd believed in her when belief seemed foolish. How do you thank someone for giving you back your life? How do you repay someone who asks for nothing in return? Sierra didn't have answers, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Noah Brandt had changed her life in ways that went far beyond physical recovery. He'd reminded her what kindness looked like, what genuine care felt like, what it meant to show up for someone day after day after day, expecting nothing back except their continued effort. She fell asleep at her desk that night, her dreams filled with movement, with walking through the city, with climbing stairs, with standing on her own 2 feet and facing the world head on. When she woke at 5 a.m., her neck stiff from sleeping in her chair, the first thing she did was look at her legs. They were still unresponsive, still stubbornly refusing to obey her commands. But now she knew something she hadn't known before. They were capable. They were healing. They were coming back to her, inch by painful inch. Sierra transferred to her wheelchair and made her way to the private bathroom attached to her office. She'd had it modified with grab bars and a roll-in shower after the accident, hating every accommodation, every reminder of what she'd lost. But this morning, as she went through her routine, she didn't feel the usual despair. Instead, she felt determination. These accommodations were temporary. They were tools, not definitions. They were helping her get through this chapter, but they wouldn't be part of the next one. By the time Noah arrived at 6, Sierra was already on the mat, warmed up and ready. "Someone's eager," Noah observed. "I want to try those weight shifts again, the ones from last night." "Sierra, you need to, rest, I know. But, Noah, I can feel something changing. My body is waking up, and I don't want to waste a single day." Noah studied her face, seeing the fierce determination there. It would have worried him if he didn't also see the wisdom that had come from 12 weeks of hard work. Sierra had learned to listen to her body, to distinguish between productive discomfort and destructive pain. "All right," he said, "but if anything feels wrong, you tell me immediately." They worked through their usual warm-up routine, then moved to the parallel bars. This time, when Sierra shifted her weight forward, the movement came easier. Her right foot slid forward almost naturally, then her left. It was still controlled, falling more than walking, but it was progress. "Good," Noah encouraged. "Now try to lift your knee slightly as you shift. Don't drag your foot. Lift and place it." Sierra's face contorted with concentration. The effort required was enormous, every muscle in her body engaging just to produce that one tiny lift-in-place movement. But she did it. Her right knee bent, her foot lifted maybe half an inch off the ground, and came down 6 inches forward. "Yes!" Sierra shouted, her voice echoing through the empty office. "Did you see that? That was a real step." "That was a real step," Noah confirmed, grinning. They practiced for another 40 minutes until Sierra was completely spent. But she'd managed to take 4 distinct steps along the parallel bars, 4 steps that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. As Noah helped her back to her wheelchair, Sierra grabbed his hand. "I'm going to do something next week," she announced. "Something I should have done months ago." "What's that?" "I'm going to walk into the Meridian meeting, not in this wheelchair, on my own 2 feet, with you supporting me if needed, but standing and walking." Noah's eyes widened. "Sierra, that's ambitious, crazy, possibly setting myself up for failure?" Sierra's smile was fierce. "Yes to all of the above, but I'm done hiding. I'm done letting this wheelchair define how the business world sees me. I'm walking into that meeting, Noah. And I'm closing the biggest acquisition of my career while standing on my own 2 feet." Looking at her face, seeing the absolute determination there, Noah knew better than to argue. "All right," he said. "Then we'd better get to work. We've got 1 week to turn 4 shaky steps into something that looks like confident walking. Then we'll work every day, morning and evening. Whatever it takes." Noah nodded slowly. Whatever it takes. As he left that morning, Noah felt a mixture of excitement and fear churning in his gut. What Sierra was proposing was bold, maybe too bold, but he'd learned over the past 12 weeks that trying to rein in Sierra Langford was like trying to hold back the ocean. She was a force of nature, and all he could do was try to guide that force in a productive direction. The next week became the most intense period of their entire training. They met twice daily, pushing Sierra's body to its absolute limits. Her progress accelerated dramatically. Whether from the increased practice or sheer force of will, Noah couldn't say. By Thursday, she could take 12 consecutive steps along the parallel bars. By Friday, she was practicing without the bars, using only Noah's arm for support. The night before the Meridian meeting, Sierra stayed late, practicing over and over until she could walk from her desk to the window and back, a distance of maybe 15 feet, without stopping. Her gait was unsteady, her movements slow and deliberate. But she was walking. Really, truly walking. "You're ready," Noah said, watching her complete the circuit for the 20th time. Sierra sank into her wheelchair, exhausted but triumphant. "Am I crazy for doing this?" "Probably," Noah admitted. "But crazy is what built your company in the first place, isn't it?" She laughed. "Fair point." Her expression grew serious. "Noah, whatever happens tomorrow, thank you. Even if I fall flat on my face in front of Meridian's entire board, this has been worth it. You've given me back something I thought I'd lost forever." "You did the work, Sierra. I just showed up." "Showing up matters." Her voice was soft. "More than you know." The next morning, Sierra arrived at the Meridian offices in San Francisco with Wilson and her legal team. They'd brought her wheelchair, but it stayed in the car. As they approached the building's entrance, Sierra took a deep breath, gripped Noah's arm, and stood up. Wilson's face went pale. "Sierra, what are you doing? We brought the wheelchair." "I'm walking in," Sierra said firmly, her hand tightening on Noah's arm. "Wilson, this is Noah Brandt. He's been helping me with my recovery. Noah, this is Wilson Chen, my CFO, and the man who's been holding this company together while I figured out how to stand up again." Wilson looked between them, clearly confused about why a janitor was accompanying them to the most important meeting of the quarter, but he had the grace not to question it. "Are you sure about this?" "No," Sierra admitted, taking her first step forward. "But I'm doing it anyway." The walk from the car to Meridian's lobby was only about 50 feet, but it felt like a marathon. Every step required absolute concentration, every movement a careful calculation of weight distribution and muscle engagement. Sierra's legs trembled with the effort, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool San Francisco morning. But she walked. Noah stayed close, his arm solid and steady beneath her hand, his voice a quiet murmur of encouragement that only she could hear. "That's it, nice and easy, you got this." When they finally reached the lobby doors, Sierra paused to catch her breath. Her legal team and Wilson stood behind them, stunned into silence by what they'd just witnessed. Through the glass, Sierra could see the Meridian receptionist looking up, her professional smile freezing as she registered who was approaching. "Ready?" Noah asked quietly. Sierra nodded, and together they walked through the doors. The receptionist stood immediately. "Ms. Langford, we weren't expecting... we're so pleased..." She fumbled for words, clearly thrown off script by Sierra's ambulatory entrance. "We're here for the 9 o'clock with Richard Meridian," Sierra said, keeping her voice steady despite the exhaustion creeping through her muscles. "I believe we're a few minutes early." "Of course. Yes, please." The receptionist gestured toward the seating area, then seemed to realize the implications. "Would you like to sit, or—" "I'll stand," Sierra said, though her legs were screaming in protest. She couldn't show weakness now, not when she'd come this far. "Thank you." The wait felt eternal. Sierra stood with Noah's support, her legal team making uncomfortable small talk, while Wilson kept shooting her concerned glances. She knew what he was thinking. This was reckless, dangerous, potentially disastrous. If her legs gave out in the middle of the meeting, if she collapsed in front of Meridian's board, it would confirm every doubt they had about her fitness to lead. But if she pulled this off, if she could walk in and negotiate this acquisition while standing on her own 2 feet, it would be the most powerful statement she could make about her return to full leadership. At exactly 9 o'clock, Richard Meridian himself emerged from the elevator. He was a tall man in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, with the kind of commanding presence that came from decades of closing billion-dollar deals. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Sierra standing in his lobby. "Ms. Langford," he said, recovering quickly and extending his hand. "What a pleasant surprise. When we heard about your accident, we feared... Well, I'm glad to see you up and about." Sierra shook his hand, maintaining her balance carefully. "Rumors of my incapacity have been greatly exaggerated, Mr. Meridian. I'm ready to discuss this acquisition." Something shifted in Meridian's expression. Calculation, reassessment, respect. "Excellent. Please, come up to the conference room, shall we?" He glanced at the elevator. "I'll take the stairs," Sierra said, the words out of her mouth before she could second-guess them. Wilson made a strangled sound behind her. Noah's hand tightened almost imperceptibly on her arm, but Sierra kept her eyes on Meridian, watching his face carefully. He smiled slowly. The stairs it is. Though I warn you, we're on the third floor. 3 floors, Sierra said. I think I can manage that. The climb was brutal. Each step required Noah's support, Sierra's hand gripping the railing with white-knuckled intensity as she hauled herself upward. Her legs shook violently. Her breathing came in ragged gasps, and halfway up the second flight, she seriously considered calling the whole thing off. But then she felt Noah's hand on her back, steady and warm, and heard his voice in her ear. One step at a time. You've already done the impossible. This is just details. So she kept climbing. By the time they reached the third floor, Sierra was drenched in sweat, her muscles screaming, her vision swimming slightly from the exertion. But she'd made it. She'd climbed 3 flights of stairs when 6 months ago the doctors had told her she'd never walk again. Meridian's expression as they emerged from the stairwell was worth every agonizing step. The calculation in his eyes had transformed into something closer to awe. Impressive, Miss Langford, he said quietly. Very impressive. The conference room was large and modern, with a massive table and walls of windows overlooking the bay. Meridian's board members were already assembled, 5 people in expensive suits, each one regarding Sierra with varying degrees of surprise and skepticism as she actually walked, to her seat at the table. Noah helped her into the chair, and Sierra felt her legs nearly collapse with relief. But she'd done it. She'd walked into this meeting literally and metaphorically standing tall. I think we can dispense with the usual pleasantries, Sierra said once everyone was seated. You've all heard about my accident. You've all had concerns about whether Langford Industries can execute this acquisition given my condition. So let me address that directly. She leaned forward, her eyes moving from face to face around the table. 6 months ago, I was in a car accident that crushed my spine. The doctors told me I'd never walk again. They were very confident about that prognosis. 3 months ago, I believed them. I was ready to step down, to let my board replace me, to accept that my career was over. Sierra paused, letting the words sink in. But then someone reminded me that impossible is just a word we use for things that haven't happened yet, and I decided to find out if the doctors were right or if impossible was negotiable. She gestured toward the door they'd just walked through. You all saw me come in here. You saw me climb 3 flights of stairs. That wasn't luck. That wasn't a miracle. That was 4 months of the hardest work I've ever done in my life. 4 months of showing up every single day, even when progress seemed impossible, even when my body screamed at me to give up, even when I couldn't imagine success. Meridian was leaning forward now, his attention completely focused on Sierra. So when you ask me if I can lead this acquisition, Sierra continued, if I have the strength and focus and determination to see this through, I want you to think about those stairs. I want you to remember that I took a diagnosis of permanent paralysis and turned it into a temporary setback. If I can do that to my own spine, imagine what I can do to your company's quarterly returns. The room was completely silent. Then one of the board members, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, spoke up. That's a compelling story, Ms. Langford, but stories don't guarantee ROI. What's your actual plan for the integration? And just like that, they were down to business. For the next 3 hours, Sierra negotiated with every ounce of skill and experience she'd accumulated over 15 years of deal-making. She presented financial projections, outlined integration timelines, addressed concerns about market overlap and cultural fit. She was sharp, confident, and completely in command, the woman she'd been before the accident, but somehow more. The accident hadn't just taken things from her. It had given her something too, a clarity about what mattered, a deeper understanding of resilience, a bone-deep knowledge that limitations were often more negotiable than they seemed. By the time they broke for lunch, Sierra could see the shift in the room. The skepticism had evaporated, replaced by the kind of engaged interest that preceded successful deals. Meridian himself was smiling, the tension in his shoulders visibly relaxed. During the break, Noah helped Sierra to a private office where she could rest. The moment the door closed, her legs gave out completely, and she collapsed into a chair. I can't feel my legs, she gasped. Noah, I seriously can't feel them. That's normal, he said, immediately moving to massage her calves. You've been standing and walking for almost 4 hours. Your muscles are completely exhausted. I still have the afternoon session, Sierra said, panic creeping into her voice. I can't. Yes, you can. You're going to rest for 20 minutes, drink some water, eat something, and let your muscles recover. Then you're going to finish this meeting and close this deal. What if I can't walk back to the conference room? Then I'll carry you, Noah said simply. But I don't think it'll come to that. Your body is stronger than you think. Sierra closed her eyes, focusing on breathing, on letting the tension drain from her muscles. Noah's hands worked methodically, coaxing life back into her exhausted legs. After a few minutes, sensation began to return, pins and needles at first, then a dull ache, then something closer to normal feeling. Better? Noah asked. Better. Sierra opened her eyes, looking at him with an expression that made his chest tighten. I couldn't do this without you. Yes, you could, but you don't have to because I'm here. A knock at the door interrupted them. Wilson poked his head in. How are you holding up? Tired but functional, Sierra said. How does it look out there? Good, really good. I think Meridian is ready to move forward, but he wants to discuss the timeline for transition. He's concerned about... Wilson hesitated. About whether I'll be able to handle the physical demands of integration, Sierra finished. He wants to know if this morning was a one-time show or if I'm actually capable of sustained leadership. Wilson nodded uncomfortably. Sierra stood, slowly, carefully, but under her own power. Then let's go show him. The afternoon session went even better than the morning. Sierra negotiated aggressively, making strategic concessions while holding firm on the points that mattered most. By 4 o'clock, they had the framework of a deal that would make Langford Industries the dominant player in their sector. As they wrapped up, Meridian extended his hand across the table. Ms. Langford, you've given me a lot to think about. I'll present this to my full board tomorrow, but I'm confident they'll approve. You've made a compelling case. Does that mean we have a deal? Sierra asked. Meridian smiled. Pending due diligence and board approval, yes. I believe we have a deal. The walk back to the car was even harder than the walk in. Sierra's legs were beyond exhausted, functioning on sheer willpower and Noah's support. She made it to the car, collapsed into the seat, and immediately burst into tears. Hey, Noah said, alarmed. What's wrong? Are you hurt? No, Sierra sobbed. I did it. I actually did it. I walked in there and closed the deal and proved that I'm still capable of leading this company. I did it, Noah. You did, he said, his own voice thick with emotion. You absolutely did. Wilson, sitting in the front seat, turned back with an expression Sierra had never seen on his usually composed face. That was the most extraordinary thing I've ever witnessed in business, he said quietly. Sierra, I knew you were driven, but what you did today, that wasn't just business savvy. That was pure courage. The flight back to their city was quiet. Sierra dozed fitfully, her body too exhausted to maintain consciousness, her mind too wired to truly rest. When they landed, she insisted on walking to the car again, though this time Noah practically carried her weight. By the time they reached Langford Tower, it was after 8 p.m. The building was mostly empty, just a few late working employees and the night security staff. Sierra walked through the lobby with Noah's support, and she saw the security guard's eyes widen. Ms. Langford, you're walking. I'm working on it, Sierra said with a tired smile. Still a ways to go. In the elevator, Sierra leaned heavily against Noah, her eyes closed. I need to ask you something, she said quietly. What? How long were you planning to do this? Help me, I mean. Was there an endpoint in your mind? Noah was quiet for a moment. I hadn't really thought about it. I guess until you didn't need help anymore. What if I always need help? Sierra opened her eyes, looking up at him. What if my legs never fully recover? What if I can walk, but not without support? What then? Then I'll keep helping, Noah said simply, for as long as you want me to. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why would you do that? Noah met her eyes, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with physical therapy or recovery or professional boundaries. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being about helping a stranger and became about being there for someone I care about. The elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor. Neither of them moved. Noah, Sierra started, but he shook his head. You don't have to say anything. I know this is complicated. I know I'm just the janitor who happened to show up at the right time. I know there's a whole world of difference between us. But I'm not going anywhere, Sierra. Not unless you tell me to go. Sierra's throat was tight. I don't want you to go. But I don't know what I'm asking for. I don't know how to navigate this. Then we'll figure it out, Noah said. The same way we figured out how to get you walking. One step at a time. They made their way to Sierra's office, where she collapsed onto the couch she'd had installed months ago for the nights she couldn't face going home. Noah sat beside her, and for a long moment they just existed together in the quiet. Tell me about your wife, Sierra said suddenly. Noah looked surprised. Why? Because you've been helping me for months, and I realize I don't know anything about you beyond what you've told me in pieces. I want to know who you are, Noah Brandt. Not just the man who helped me walk, but the man who lost his wife and raised his daughter and ended up cleaning office buildings at night. So Noah told her. He told her about meeting Jennifer in college, how she'd been studying to be a teacher, and he'd been working construction to pay for classes he ended up dropping out of when money got too tight. He told her about their wedding, small, just immediate family and close friends, and how they'd spent their honeymoon camping because it was all they could afford. He told her about Lila's birth, how Jennifer had labored for 16 hours, and how he'd never felt such terror and joy simultaneously. He told her about the morning Jennifer died, how normal it had started, how she'd been making pancakes and laughing at something on the radio, how she'd suddenly gone quiet and dropped the spatula and he'd turned to see her falling. I tried CPR, Noah said, his voice distant with memory. I called 911. I did everything right, but the aneurysm was massive. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. Just gone. One moment she was there making pancakes and planning Lila's birthday party, and the next she was... He stopped, his jaw working. Sierra reached out and took his hand. I'm sorry, she said. I can't imagine how hard that must have been. The hardest part wasn't losing her, Noah said. I mean, that was devastating, but grief is straightforward in its own way. The hardest part was watching Lila lose her mother and not being able to fix it. She was 3 years old. She didn't understand why Mommy wasn't coming home. She kept asking when Mommy would be back from the hospital, and I had to tell her over and over that Mommy wasn't coming back. How did you get through it? Honestly, I don't know. I just kept getting up every day. I made breakfast. I took Lila to daycare. I went to work. I picked her up. I made dinner. I read bedtime stories. And somewhere in all that routine, we both started healing. Not healed. I don't know if you ever fully heal from something like that, but healing. Sierra squeezed his hand. And the janitorial work? Pays better than you'd think, especially night shifts. And it lets me be home during the day for Lila. I can drop her off at school, be there when she gets home, make dinner together, put her to bed. Then I work while she's sleeping. He smiled slightly. It's not glamorous, but it works for us. You're a good father, Sierra said quietly. I try. Some days I succeed, some days I fail, but I keep trying. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Geez. Then Sierra said, I need to tell you something too. Okay. Before the accident, I was engaged. His name was David. He was a venture capitalist, brilliant, ambitious, exactly the kind of man everyone expected me to end up with. Sierra's voice was flat, emotionless. 2 weeks after the accident, while I was still in the hospital, he came to visit me. He told me he'd been thinking a lot about our future together, about the life we'd planned. Then he told me he didn't think he could handle being with someone who was disabled. Noah's hand tightened around hers. He left you while you were in the hospital? He was very apologetic about it, very concerned for my feelings. He said he hoped we could still be friends, that he'd always care about me, that this was just about him not being strong enough to handle what was ahead. Sierra laughed bitterly. The worst part is I understood. I looked at myself, broken, useless, facing a lifetime in a wheelchair, and I understood why he wouldn't want that. Sierra, no, let me finish. I understood because I'd made my entire identity about being strong, capable, untouchable. I'd built a persona of someone who didn't need anyone, who could handle anything, and the accident showed everyone, showed me, that it was all a facade. Take away my ability to walk, and suddenly I was nothing. Just a broken woman in a wheelchair that even her fiancé didn't want anymore. That's not true, Noah said fiercely. You're not nothing. You were never nothing. That man was a coward who didn't deserve you. Maybe. Or maybe he was just honest about his limitations. Not everyone can handle being with someone who's damaged. You're not damaged, Noah said. You're recovering. There's a difference. Sierra looked at him, really looked at him, and felt something shift in her chest. This man, this janitor with his second-hand clothes and his worn shoes and his kind eyes, had seen her at her absolute worst and chosen to stay. Had seen her broken and called her strong. Had witnessed her defeat and insisted on her victory. How did I get so lucky, she whispered, to have you walk into my office that night? I think I'm the lucky one, Noah said. You've taught me something too, you know. What? That strength isn't about never needing help. It's about having the courage to accept help when you need it. He smiled. You've helped me as much as I've helped you. Before Sierra could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Wilson. Board meeting tomorrow at 10 to discuss Meridian deal. Your attendance in person strongly encouraged. Sierra showed Noah the message. They want to see if today was a fluke or if I can actually sustain this. Can you? I don't know. My legs feel like jelly. I'm exhausted in ways I didn't know were possible. And tomorrow I have to do it all over again. Walk in, stand through a meeting, prove that I'm capable of leading. She looked at him. Can I do that? Yes, Noah said without hesitation. You walked into Meridian's office today and closed $1 billion deal while standing on legs that shouldn't work. Tomorrow, you'll walk into your own boardroom and own it. You've already done the impossible, Sierra. Everything else is just practice. That night, Sierra didn't go home. She stayed in her office, Noah keeping her company until midnight when he had to leave to relieve his babysitter. Before he left, he helped her through a gentle stretching routine to ease her exhausted muscles. Get some sleep, he said at the door. And Sierra, you were magnificent today. After he left, Sierra lay on her couch and stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. The events of the day felt surreal. The walk into Meridian's office, the climb up the stairs, the hours of standing and negotiating. 6 months ago, she'd been told she'd never walk again. Today, she'd climbed 3 flights of stairs and closed the deal of her career. And tomorrow, she'd do it again. She thought about Noah's words, that strength was about accepting help when you needed it. For so long, she'd thought needing help was weakness. She'd built her entire career on self-sufficiency, on being the person who helped others but never needed help herself. But these past 4 months had taught her something different. Accepting Noah's help hadn't made her weaker. It had made her stronger. Letting him see her vulnerable hadn't diminished her. It had made her more fully human. Sierra pulled out her phone and sent a text to Noah. Thank you for reminding me that asking for help is brave, not weak. Sweet dreams to you and Lila. His response came a few minutes later. Sweet dreams, Sierra. Tomorrow, you're going to kill it. She smiled at the screen, then set an alarm for 5 a.m. She'd need extra time to stretch and prepare before the board meeting. Her body was screaming in protest, but her mind was clear and focused. The next morning, Sierra walked into her own boardroom at exactly 10 o'clock. The board members, 12 powerful men and women who'd been with Langford Industries from the beginning, all stood as she entered, walking, without a wheelchair, without visible assistance, walking on her own 2 feet. The room erupted in spontaneous applause. Sierra made her way to her seat at the head of the table, her legs shaking but holding. As she sat down, she saw tears in several board members' eyes. These people had known her for years, had watched her build this company from nothing, had witnessed her accident and her subsequent withdrawal, and now they were watching her return. Thank you all for coming, Sierra said, her voice steady. I know there have been questions about my ability to continue leading this company. I hope yesterday's successful negotiation with Meridian has answered some of those questions, but I want to address the elephant in the room directly. She stood up again, a calculated move that made several people gasp, and remained standing as she spoke. 6 months ago, I had an accident that should have ended my career. The medical consensus was that I would never walk again. Many of you probably thought my time as CEO was over. I thought my time as CEO was over. But someone reminded me that impossible is negotiable, and I decided to find out just how negotiable it was. Sierra paused, letting her eyes move around the table. I won't lie to you and say I'm fully recovered. I'm not. There are still days when my legs don't work the way I want them to. There are still limitations I'm working to overcome, but I am working. Every single day I'm fighting to reclaim what the accident took from me, and I'm going to win that fight. She sat back down, feeling her legs tremble with relief. So here's what I'm proposing. Give me 6 more months. 6 months to prove that I can not only walk, but lead. 6 months to execute the Meridian integration and show you that my capabilities as a CEO haven't diminished. And if at the end of that time you feel I'm not fit to continue, I'll step down willingly. But I'm asking you for those 6 months. I'm asking you to bet on me one more time. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Margaret Chen, the longest-serving board member, spoke up. Sierra, I don't think I speak out of turn when I say that every person in this room has already placed their bet on you. We've watched you build this company into what it is today. We've watched you navigate economic downturns, hostile takeovers, and market disruptions. And now we've watched you literally learn to walk again because you refuse to accept defeat. She smiled. You don't need 6 months to prove yourself. You proved yourself yesterday when you walked into Meridian's office. You proved yourself today when you walked in here. The question isn't whether you can lead this company. It's whether this company deserves to be led by someone as extraordinary as you. Sierra felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Margaret. That means more than you know. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, but the tone had shifted fundamentally. Sierra wasn't defending her position anymore. She was commanding it. They discussed the Meridian integration timeline, debated structural changes, and planned for Q4 targets. It was business as usual, except that their CEO was standing at the whiteboard, marker in hand, mapping out strategies while balancing on legs that had been paralyzed 4 months ago. When the meeting finally adjourned, Wilson lingered behind. That was perfect, he said. Exactly what they needed to see. It was exhausting, Sierra admitted, sinking back into her chair. But necessary. Can I ask you something? Wilson's expression was curious. Who is he? The man who came with us to San Francisco? Sierra hesitated. He's someone who helped me when I needed it most. He's more than that, Wilson observed. I saw how you looked at him, how he looked at you. I don't know what he is, Sierra said honestly. I don't know how to categorize what we have, but I know I wouldn't be standing here, literally standing, without him. Wilson nodded slowly. Well, whoever he is, whatever this is, I'm glad you found it. You've been alone too long, Sierra, even before the accident. After Wilson left, Sierra sat in the empty boardroom, thinking about his words. She had been alone for a long time. She'd convinced herself that loneliness was the price of success, that isolation was necessary for leadership. But Noah had shown her something different. That evening, when Noah arrived for their usual session, Sierra was waiting for him with an expression he couldn't quite read. What's wrong? He asked immediately. Nothing's wrong. Everything's right, actually. The board fully supports me. The Meridian deal is moving forward. My executives are starting to look at me like a CEO again, instead of a tragedy. She paused. But I need to talk to you about something. Noah set down his bag slowly. Okay. Sit down, Sierra said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. When he hesitated, she added, Please. He sat. Sierra wheeled herself around the desk, so there was nothing between them, then took a deep breath. I've been thinking about what happens next. About what this is, what we're doing here. She met his eyes. Noah, you've changed my life. You've given me back something I thought was lost forever. And somewhere in the process, you became... She stopped, struggling for words. You became the most important person in my world. Noah's expression was carefully neutral. Sierra, let me finish, please. She leaned forward. I know this is complicated. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this doesn't make sense. You're my employee, technically, even if you've been acting as my physical therapist. There's a power dynamic that makes any relationship between us problematic. You have a daughter to think about. I have a company to run and a reputation to maintain. And 6 months ago, I was engaged to someone else while you're still grieving your wife. Then why are we having this conversation? Noah asked quietly. Because despite all of that, despite every logical reason why this is a terrible idea, I can't stop thinking about you. I can't stop replaying the moment you knelt beside my wheelchair and promised to help me walk. I can't stop remembering how patient you've been, how kind, how you've seen me at my absolute worst and never once looked at me like I was broken. Her voice cracked slightly, and I need to know if I'm alone in feeling this way or if somewhere in these past 4 months you started feeling it too. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and fear. Noah sat very still, his hands clasped in his lap, his face betraying nothing. Finally, he spoke. The first time I brought Lila to meet you, she asked me later if you were going to be her new mommy. Sierra's breath caught. I told her no, Noah continued. I told her you were just someone Daddy was helping, but she said, "But you smile different when you talk about her. You smile the way you used to smile when you talked about Mommy." He looked up, meeting Sierra's eyes, and I realized she was right. Somewhere along the way, helping you stopped being about physical therapy and became about wanting to see you smile, wanting to hear you laugh, wanting to be the person you turned to when things got hard. Noah, but, he interrupted gently, I'm also terrified. Jennifer's been gone for 4 years, and I still find myself reaching for my phone to text her about something funny Lila did. I still set out 2 coffee cups in the morning sometimes before I remember. And the thought of loving someone again, of opening myself up to that kind of loss again, his voice broke. I don't know if I'm capable of it. Sierra wheeled herself closer, reaching out to take his hands. I'm not asking you to stop loving Jennifer. I would never ask that. She was your wife, Lila's mother. She'll always be part of who you are. Then what are you asking? I'm asking if there's room in your life for something new, not as a replacement for what you lost, but as something separate, something that exists alongside your memories of her, not instead of them. Sierra squeezed his hands. I'm asking if you think you could take the risk of caring about someone again, knowing that life is fragile and uncertain and sometimes unfair. Noah looked at their joined hands, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Do you know what Lila said to me last night? What? She said, Daddy, I like Miss Sierra. She's sad like us, but she's trying to be happy. Can we help her be happy? And I realized that's exactly what we've been doing. You've been helping me remember how to be alive instead of just existing, and maybe I've been helping you remember the same thing. So what do we do? Sierra asked. Where do we go from here? Honestly, I have no idea. This is the most complicated situation I've ever been in. Noah smiled slightly. But I think maybe we figure it out the same way we figured out how to get you walking, one step at a time, one day at a time, without any guarantees about where we'll end up. I can work with that, Sierra said softly. Then, surprising herself, she added, Noah, would you like to have dinner with me? Not here in the office, not as part of our training sessions. An actual dinner at an actual restaurant, like 2 people who are trying to figure out if this impossible thing between them might actually be possible? Noah was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Yes, but I need to do something first. What? He stood up, walked to her bookshelf, and pulled down a framed photograph she kept there. It was one of the few personal items in her office, a picture of her standing at the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro 3 years ago, arms raised in victory, her face flushed with accomplishment and joy. This is who you are, Noah said, holding up the photo. Not the CEO in the power suits, not the woman in the wheelchair, not even the person learning to walk again. This is you, someone who climbs mountains because they're there, someone who doesn't accept limitations, someone who lives fully and completely and courageously. He set the photo down and looked at her seriously. If we do this, if we try to build something together, I need you to promise me that you'll stay this person, that you won't dim your light or scale back your ambitions or try to make yourself smaller to fit into my life, because that's not what I want. I want all of you, Sierra, the brilliant ambitious, sometimes impossible woman who decided to learn to walk again just to prove the doctors wrong. Sierra felt tears streaming down her face. I promise. But you have to promise me something too. What? Promise me you'll let me love Lila. Not as a replacement for her mother, never that, but as someone who cares about her, who wants to be part of her life, who wants to see her grow up and be there for the moments that matter. Can you promise me that? Noah's eyes were bright. Yeah, I can promise that. They sat together in the quiet of Sierra's office, not speaking, just being. After a while, Noah said, We should probably still do the physical therapy session. You've had 2 big days and your muscles need the work. Sierra laughed through her tears. Ever the practical one. Someone has to be, since you're determined to climb metaphorical mountains on legs that barely work. They fell into their familiar routine, stretching, strengthening exercises, practice walks with the parallel bars. But something had shifted between them. The touches lingered a little longer. The eye contact held a little deeper. The space between them felt charged with possibility. By the time they finished, it was after 9 p.m. As Noah was packing up his things, Sierra said, Saturday night, for dinner, if you can get a babysitter. My neighbor loves watching Lila. Saturday works. Should I pick you up or... Let's meet there, Noah said. I think we should keep this separate from work, from the building, from all of this. Just you and me figuring out who we are outside of CEO and janitor, patient and therapist. Where should we go? Noah smiled. Let me surprise you. The next 3 days were strange. Sierra and Noah maintained their usual schedule, morning and evening sessions focused on physical recovery. But there was an undercurrent of anticipation, a sense that something significant was shifting between them. They were careful not to let it interfere with the work. If anything, Sierra pushed herself harder than ever, as if proving her physical recovery would somehow validate the emotional risk they were both preparing to take. On Friday evening, Noah brought Lila with him again. The little girl had grown comfortable in Sierra's office over the past months, treating it like a second home. She had her own special spot on the couch, where she'd draw, while her father helped Sierra exercise. Miss Sierra, Lila said, looking up from her artwork, are you going to come to my ballet recital next month? Sierra glanced at Noah, unsure how to respond. They'd agreed to take things slowly, to figure out what they were to each other before involving Lila too deeply. But the little girl was looking at her with such hopeful eyes that Sierra couldn't bring herself to say no. If your daddy says it's okay, Sierra said carefully. Lila turned to Noah. Can she come, Daddy? Please? I want her to see me dance. Noah met Sierra's eyes over his daughter's head, and that look was a question, an acknowledgement of what this invitation meant. Having Sierra at Lila's recital would be a statement to Lila, to the other parents, to themselves, that whatever was developing between them was real enough to include in the parts of their lives that mattered most. Of course she can come, Noah said softly, if she wants to. I want to, Sierra said. I would love to see you dance, Lila. The little girl beamed, returning to her drawing with renewed enthusiasm. Noah moved closer to Sierra, his voice low enough that Lila couldn't hear. Are you sure about this? Once we involve her, it gets more complicated, more real. I'm sure, Sierra said. I meant what I said the other night. I want to be part of her life. I want to be part of both of your lives, if you'll let me. That night, after Noah and Lila left, Sierra stayed late in her office, thinking about the strange turns her life had taken. 6 months ago, she'd been planning a wedding to a man who'd seemed perfect on paper, but had revealed his true character when things got difficult. She'd been running a company with ruthless efficiency, measuring her worth in quarterly profits and market share. And now she was learning to walk again with the help of a janitor who'd shown her more genuine compassion than anyone in her previous life. She was falling for a man who came with complications. A young daughter, memories of a lost wife, a life that existed in a completely different world from her own. It should have felt like a mistake. It should have felt reckless and foolish and dangerous. Instead, it felt like the first truly honest thing she'd done in years. Saturday arrived with the weight of expectation. Sierra spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing what to wear, eventually settling on a simple dress that was elegant without being overly formal. She practiced walking in heels, low ones, nothing like the 4-inch stilettos she used to favor, but heels nonetheless. The effort required was immense, but she was determined to walk into this restaurant on her own 2 feet, wearing shoes that made her feel like herself again. Noah had texted her an address in a neighborhood she didn't know well, not the expensive downtown district where she usually dined, but a quieter area with tree-lined streets and family-owned businesses. When her car pulled up to the restaurant, Sierra saw it was small and intimate, with warm lighting glowing through the windows and herbs growing in boxes outside the door. Noah was waiting outside, and Sierra's breath caught when she saw him. He'd dressed up, not in an expensive suit, but in simple slacks and a button-down shirt that somehow made him look both nervous and confident. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd just showered, and he held a small bouquet of flowers that looked like they'd come from a local market rather than a fancy florist. "Hi," he said as Sierra's driver helped her out of the car. "Hi," she replied, accepting the flowers. They were wildflowers, colorful and unpretentious and completely perfect. "These are beautiful. They reminded me of you. Strong but delicate, surviving in unexpected places." Sierra laughed. "Did you rehearse that line?" "About 6 times on the drive over." Noah offered his arm. "Ready?" Together, they walked into the restaurant. The owner, a woman in her 60s with warm eyes and flour-dusted hands, greeted Noah like an old friend. "Noah! And this must be your special guest. Welcome, welcome. I have your table ready." The table was in a corner, private but not isolated, with candles and fresh flowers. Sierra lowered herself into the chair carefully, grateful that her legs had cooperated for the walk inside. "You're a regular here?" she asked as Noah sat across from her. "Lila and I come here for special occasions. Birthdays, the anniversary of Jennifer's death, the day I got this job." He smiled. "Maria makes the best lasagna in the city, and she never minds when Lila gets pasta sauce everywhere." "It's perfect," Sierra said, and meant it. This was so different from the high-end restaurants she usually frequented. No sommelier, no tasting menus, no pretension, just good food, warm atmosphere, and the company of someone she was beginning to realize she cared about more than she'd admitted even to herself. They ordered wine and appetizers, and for a while the conversation was light. Safe topics about work, about Lila's school, about the progress of Sierra's recovery. But as the evening deepened and the wine loosened their tongues, they began to talk about heavier things. "Tell me about the accident," Noah said. "I know the medical details, but I don't know what happened. How did you end up in that car?" Sierra took a sip of wine, gathering her thoughts. "I was driving home from a business dinner. It was raining, one of those heavy fall rains that makes the roads slick and the visibility terrible. I was on the highway, probably driving too fast because I was tired and just wanted to get home. And then a semi in the next lane started to merge into my lane without signaling." She paused, the memory vivid despite the months that had passed. "I had a choice. Let him hit me or swerve. I swerved. The car hydroplaned, spun out, and slammed into the concrete divider. The impact crushed the driver's side of the car. My spine compressed at L1 and L2, and I lost consciousness immediately." "Were you alone?" "Completely. It was after 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. There wasn't much traffic. A truck driver saw the accident and called 911, but I was unconscious for almost 15 minutes before the ambulance arrived." Sierra's hands tightened around her wine glass. "The doctor said if the impact had been a few inches higher or lower, I would have died instantly. Instead, I just lost the use of my legs." "Just?" Noah raised an eyebrow. "You know what I mean. I survived. That should have felt like a victory, but for months it felt like the worst possible outcome. I was alive, but not living. Existing, but not functioning. I spent 6 months wishing the accident had finished the job." Noah reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm glad it didn't." "Me too, now, but for a long time I wasn't." Sierra met his eyes. "You saved my life, Noah. Not in the dramatic sense of pulling me from a burning building, but in the real day-to-day sense of giving me a reason to keep fighting when I'd lost all my reasons." "You saved yourself," Noah corrected gently. "I just showed up and reminded you that you could." Their food arrived, the famous lasagna, along with fresh bread and salad, and they ate slowly, savoring both the meal and the conversation. Sierra told Noah about building her company, about the early days when she'd been working 100-hour weeks and living on coffee and determination. Noah told her about his childhood, growing up in a working-class family where ambition was measured in steady paychecks and paid-off mortgages rather than corporate empires. "We're from completely different worlds," Sierra observed. "Does that bother you?" "No," she said honestly. "If anything, it's refreshing. Everyone in my world measures success the same way. Money, power, status. But you measure it differently. You measure it in Lila's happiness, in being able to provide for her, in being present for the moments that matter. I think your way might be healthier." "Both ways are valid," Noah said. "You've built something incredible, Sierra. You employ thousands of people, provide livelihoods for families, create value in the world. That matters. But I've also sacrificed everything else for it. Relationships, friendships, health, peace of mind. I've spent 15 years climbing a mountain, and when I finally got to the top, I realized I was there alone." She paused. "The accident forced me to reevaluate what success means, and I'm still figuring out the answer." They talked for hours, losing track of time as the restaurant slowly emptied around them. Maria eventually came over with a knowing smile. "I hate to interrupt, but we're closing soon. Can I get you anything else?" Noah checked his watch and looked shocked. "It's almost midnight. I'm so sorry, Maria." "Don't apologize. It's good to see you happy, Noah. Both of you, stay as long as you need. I'll be in the kitchen." After she left, Sierra said, "She clearly adores you. Her son was Jennifer's best friend growing up. She's been like a second mother to me since Jennifer died. She watches Lila sometimes when my regular sitter is unavailable." "You have a good support system." "I do. I've been lucky that way. After Jennifer died, people showed up for us. Neighbors brought food, friends babysat. Maria gave me free meals when money was tight." Noah's expression grew thoughtful. "It taught me something important about community, about letting people help you. I think that's why I was able to help you, because I'd experienced being on the receiving end of that kind of generosity." "I never had that," Sierra admitted. "I built my success on the belief that asking for help was weakness, that independence was the ultimate goal. The accident shattered that belief, but it took you to show me that there was another way." They finally left the restaurant close to 1 a.m., both aware that they'd crossed some invisible threshold. This had been more than dinner. It had been a declaration that whatever was developing between them was worth exploring, worth the risk, worth the complications. Noah walked Sierra to her car, the city quiet around them. Before she got in, she turned to face him. "Thank you for tonight, for everything, really, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself, for believing in me when I'd stopped believing, for—" Noah kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. Sierra froze for a heartbeat, then melted into it, her hands coming up to frame his face. The kiss deepened, became something more certain, more real. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," Noah admitted. "I've wanted you to do that for weeks," Sierra replied. They stood there for a long moment, just looking at each other, both aware that they'd just irrevocably changed their relationship. There was no going back now. They'd moved beyond CEO and janitor, beyond patient and helper, into territory that was uncharted and terrifying and exhilarating. "I should go," Noah said reluctantly. "My neighbor will be wondering where I am." "I know." Sierra squeezed his hands. "Same time Monday morning?" "For physical therapy, yes. But Sierra, this doesn't change that. We still need to keep working on your recovery. I can't let my feelings for you interfere with helping you walk." "Agreed. Physical therapy is physical therapy. Everything else is everything else," Noah finished. They shared one more kiss before Sierra got into her car. As her driver pulled away, she looked back to see Noah standing on the sidewalk, watching her leave, a smile on his face that made her heart flutter in ways she'd thought she'd forgotten. The next few weeks established a new rhythm. Mornings and evenings were still dedicated to physical therapy, but now there were also dinners, walks in the park with Lila, quiet evenings at Noah's modest apartment watching movies while Lila slept. Sierra found herself experiencing parts of normal life she'd missed during her climb to the top. Grocery shopping, playground visits, bedtime stories. Lila took to Sierra with the easy acceptance of children, though Sierra was careful never to overstep or try to replace Jennifer. They talked about Lila's mother openly, looking at photos, sharing stories. Noah had created a memory box for Lila filled with Jennifer's things, and he let Sierra look through it, trusting her with the most precious remnants of his former life. She was beautiful, Sierra said, studying a photo of Jennifer at the beach, laughing at something off camera. She was, Noah agreed. She was also stubborn, terrible with money, and sang off-key to every song on the radio. She burned dinner at least twice a week and could never remember to put gas in the car before it hit empty. Sierra looked at him in surprise. You never talk about her flaws. Because for a long time it felt wrong, like acknowledging she wasn't perfect somehow dishonored her memory. Noah took the photo, tracing Jennifer's face with his finger. But Lila's getting older, and I want her to remember her mother as a real person, not a saint. Jennifer was wonderful and flawed and completely human, just like the rest of us. Do you think she'd approve of me? Sierra asked quietly. Noah was quiet for a long moment. I think she'd be glad I found someone who challenges me, who makes me want to be better, who treats Lila with such care. I think she'd worry that you work too hard and don't eat enough vegetables. And I think she'd probably make some joke about me dating my boss and violating every HR policy ever written. Sierra laughed despite the emotional weight of the conversation. We are sort of a walking HR nightmare, aren't we? Completely. Which is why I've been meaning to talk to you about something. What? I need to quit my job as janitor at Langford Industries. Sierra's stomach dropped. What? Why? Because as long as I'm your employee, this relationship is ethically questionable. There's a power imbalance that makes everything complicated. So I've been looking for other janitorial positions, and I found one at a hospital across town. Better pay, actually, and the night shift hours work better for Lila's school schedule. You're quitting because of me? I'm quitting because of us, Noah corrected. If we're going to do this, really do this, we need to do it right. No conflicts of interest, no whispers about favoritism or inappropriate relationships. Clean slate. Sierra processed this, her emotions complicated. On one hand, she understood his reasoning and even agreed with it. On the other hand, the thought of Noah not being in her building every night felt wrong. When? She asked. 2 weeks. I've already given notice to facilities management. They think I'm leaving for the better pay, which is true, just not the whole truth. Will we still do the physical therapy sessions? Of course. But maybe we should start transitioning you to a real physical therapist soon, someone with actual credentials and training. Noah held up his hand when Sierra started to protest. I'm not abandoning you. I'm just acknowledging that you've progressed beyond what I can help with. You're walking, Sierra. Really walking. You don't need me anymore, at least not for that. But I do need you, Sierra said, just for different reasons now. And I'll be here for those reasons, but I think it's time we separate the different parts of our relationship. I want to be your partner, not your therapist, your equal, not your employee. Sierra understood what he was saying, even appreciated it, but the transition still felt bittersweet. These past months, their physical therapy sessions had been the scaffolding around which everything else was built. Without that structure, they'd have to figure out how to be together in a more normal way. A week later, Sierra attended Lila's ballet recital. She sat in the audience between Noah and his neighbor, Marcus, watching 4-year-olds stumble through a simplified version of Swan Lake. Lila was in the second row, her face serious with concentration as she tried to remember the moves. When the performance ended, Lila bounded off stage and ran straight to Sierra. Did you see me? Did you see my pirouette? You were magnificent, Sierra said, hugging the little girl. A natural prima ballerina. Later, at the ice cream shop where they'd gone to celebrate, Lila asked Sierra, Are you going to be Daddy's girlfriend? Noah choked on his coffee. Lila, that's not... We haven't... It's okay, Sierra said, meeting Noah's eyes over Lila's head. Then she looked at the little girl seriously. Would that be okay with you if I was? Lila considered this carefully, her face scrunched in thought. Would you still be Miss Sierra, or would I have to call you something else? You can call me whatever feels right to you. And would you come to my stuff, like school plays and parent days and birthday parties? If you want me to, yes. And would you read me bedtime stories sometimes? I would love to read you bedtime stories. Lila nodded decisively. Then yes, you can be Daddy's girlfriend, but you have to promise not to leave us like Mommy did. The request was so innocent, so heartbreaking, that Sierra felt tears spring to her eyes. She looked at Noah, who was clearly struggling with his own emotions. Sweetheart, Noah said gently, Mommy didn't choose to leave us. She died. That's different. But people leave sometimes anyway, Lila insisted, her lower lip trembling. My friend Emma's daddy left, and he didn't die. He just left. Sierra took Lila's small hands in hers. I can't promise I'll never die, because that's not something anyone can promise. But I can promise that I won't choose to leave. I care about you and your daddy very much, and I want to be part of your lives for as long as you'll have me, okay? Lila studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Can I have sprinkles on my ice cream now? The crisis passed as quickly as it had arrived, as things often did with children. But later, after they'd dropped Lila off with Marcus for a sleepover, Noah and Sierra sat in his car, processing what had happened. I'm sorry about that, Noah said. She's been asking more questions about death lately. I think she's processing Jennifer's death in new ways as she gets older. Don't apologize. She was being honest about her fears. That's healthy. Sierra paused. But Noah, what she asked me about promises, I meant what I said. I'm not going anywhere. I know it's early. I know we're still figuring this out. But I need you to know that I'm committed to this, to us, to all of us. Noah reached over and took her hand. I know. I can see it in how you are with her, in how patient you are, how you never try to replace Jennifer, but just exist alongside the memory of her. He smiled. Lila loves you, you know. She told me last week that you're her favorite grown-up besides me and Marcus. She's a remarkable kid. You've done an amazing job raising her alone. I haven't been alone. I've had help. Marcus, Maria, my parents, even though they live across the country. And now I have you. He brought her hand to his lips. You've made my life better in ways I didn't know it could be better. Not just because you're brilliant and beautiful and intimidatingly successful, but because you see Lila as a whole person, not just the daughter of the guy you're dating. That matters more than you know. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights, both aware that they were building something rare and precious. Something that had started in the most unlikely way, with a janitor kneeling beside a wheelchair in an empty office, and had grown into this complex, beautiful thing that neither of them had been looking for but both desperately needed. A month later, Sierra stood on the stage at the annual Langford Industries Gala, the company's biggest event of the year. 500 employees, investors, and industry leaders filled the ballroom, all watching as their CEO walked across the stage. Walked, without a wheelchair, without visible support, her gait still slightly uneven, but unmistakably mobile. The applause was thunderous. Sierra reached the microphone and waited for the noise to die down. Thank you all for being here tonight. This year has been transformative for Langford Industries. We closed the Meridian acquisition, expanded into 3 new markets, and posted record profits for the 5th consecutive quarter. By any measure, this has been a successful year. She paused, looking out at the crowd. But I want to talk about a different kind of success tonight, one that doesn't show up in quarterly reports or shareholder meetings. 6 months ago, I was told I would never walk again. The doctors were very confident about that, and I believed them. I accepted that my life as I'd known it was over. The room was completely silent. But then someone reminded me that impossible is just a word, that limitations are often more negotiable than they seem, that giving up is a choice, not an inevitability. Sierra's voice strengthened. So I made a different choice. I chose to work, to fight, to show up every single day and do the hard, painful, frustrating work of recovery. And you all just saw the result, me walking across this stage on my own 2 feet. She smiled. I'm telling you this not to inspire you or to present myself as some kind of hero. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand something about this company. Langford Industries was built on the principle that we don't accept limitations, that we push boundaries, challenge assumptions, and refuse to settle for what everyone else thinks is possible. And this year, I had to apply that principle to my own body, my own life. Sierra looked directly at Noah, who was standing at the back of the ballroom in a proper suit this time, Lila beside him in a fancy dress. I couldn't have done it alone. None of us ever do anything truly great alone. We need people who believe in us when we don't believe in ourselves, who show up day after day asking nothing in return except our continued effort, who see potential where others see limitation. She raised her glass. So tonight I want to toast not just to this company's success, but to the kind of success that really matters, to the people who help us when we fall, to the courage to ask for that help, and to the understanding that our greatest strengths often come from our willingness to be vulnerable, to admit we need others, to accept help when it's offered. The crowd erupted in applause again, and Sierra made her way carefully down the stage stairs. Noah met her at the bottom, offering his arm with a smile that was proud and private and full of love. "That was a hell of a speech," he murmured as they walked together toward their table. "I had a hell of an inspiration," Sierra replied. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and conversations. People who hadn't spoken to Sierra in months, who'd written her off after the accident, now lined up to shake her hand and comment on her remarkable recovery. Sierra accepted their praise graciously, but she was acutely aware that many of these same people had been ready to push her out when she'd seemed weak. Only Noah had seen her at her worst and stayed anyway. Late in the evening, after Lila had fallen asleep in her chair and the crowd had thinned, Wilson approached their table. "Can I speak with you privately, Sierra?" They stepped out onto the terrace overlooking the city. Wilson was quiet for a moment, then said, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For doubting you. After the accident, I started preparing to take over as CEO. I told myself I was just being prudent, planning for all contingencies, but the truth is I'd given up on you. I thought you were done." He met her eyes. "I was wrong. What you've accomplished in these past months, not just the physical recovery, but the way you've taken back control of the company, closed the Meridian deal, reinvigorated the leadership team, it's extraordinary, and I'm sorry I doubted you." Sierra was quiet, processing this. "Thank you for saying that, and for being honest." She paused. "But Wilson, I need to be honest too. 6 months ago, you were right to doubt me. I had given up. If you'd taken over as CEO then, it would have been the right move for the company. I wasn't capable of leading. But you are now. Because someone reminded me that I could be. That's the difference, Wilson. When I fell, you prepared to replace me. And I don't blame you for that. It was the logical business decision. But Noah knelt beside me and said, 'I'll help you stand.' And that made all the difference." Wilson looked back through the windows at Noah, who was gently carrying a sleeping Lila toward the exit. "He's good for you. I can see it. You're different now, still driven, still brilliant, but more human somehow, more real. He taught me that strength and vulnerability aren't opposites, that asking for help isn't weakness, that the people who see you at your worst and choose to stay are the ones worth keeping in your life." "Is it serious, between you two?" Sierra smiled. "Yes, very serious." "Good." Wilson extended his hand. "Then congratulations on both your recoveries, the one everyone can see and the one that matters more." After he left, Sierra stood alone on the terrace, looking out at the city she'd conquered through sheer force of will. She'd spent 15 years building an empire, proving she could succeed in a male-dominated industry, accumulating wealth and power and influence. And it had taken losing everything, her mobility, her independence, her sense of self, to learn what actually mattered. Inside, Noah was settling Lila more comfortably in her chair, his movements gentle and practiced. He looked up, saw Sierra watching, and smiled. She smiled back, and in that moment, standing on her own 2 feet, surrounded by the success she'd built but focused on the man who'd helped her rebuild herself, Sierra understood something fundamental. The empire she'd created would eventually pass to someone else. The quarterly reports and market victories would fade into history. But the connections she'd made, with Noah, with Lila, with the parts of herself she'd rediscovered in recovery, those would last. Those were the achievements that actually mattered. 3 months after the gala, Sierra stood in front of the mirror in her office bathroom, staring at her reflection with a mixture of disbelief and pride. She was wearing running shoes, actual running shoes, and athletic clothes. In her hand was a doctor's clearance form that had arrived that morning, signed by 3 different specialists, all agreeing on something that had seemed impossible a year ago. She was medically cleared to run. Not marathon running, not competitive athletics, but light jogging. The kind of movement that most people took completely for granted, but that represented the final victory in Sierra's long battle back to mobility. A knock on her office door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Noah entered, Lila bouncing beside him. It was Saturday, and they'd planned to spend the day together. The 3 of them had fallen into a comfortable routine of weekend adventures that ranged from zoo visits to cooking experiments in Noah's tiny kitchen. "You're wearing workout clothes," Noah observed, his eyes widening as he took in her outfit. "Sierra, what are you planning?" She held up the clearance form, unable to contain her grin. "Dr. Morrison called this morning. All 3 specialists reviewed my latest scans and mobility assessments. They're clearing me for light cardiovascular exercise, including jogging." Noah's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, concern, pride, and finally settling on cautious excitement. "That's incredible. But Sierra, you need to be careful. Just because you're cleared doesn't mean—" I know. Start slow. Listen to my body. Don't push too hard." Sierra moved closer to him. "But Noah, I want to try. Today. With you. I want to run, even if it's just for 30 seconds, because a year ago the doctors told me I'd never even walk again." Lila tugged on Sierra's sleeve. "Can I come too? I'm a really good runner. I'm the fastest in my class." Sierra knelt down to Lila's level, a movement that had become natural over the months, but still felt like a small miracle every time she did it. "Of course you can come. But you might have to go slow for us old people." "You're not old," Lila said seriously. "My teacher is old. She has gray hair and everything. You just have a hurt back that's getting better." They drove to the park where Sierra and Noah had walked countless times during her recovery. The path around the lake was exactly 1 mile. Sierra knew because they'd measured it months ago when she'd first managed to walk the entire distance without stopping. Now, standing at the trailhead, Sierra felt her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. What if she couldn't do it? What if her legs gave out? What if this was one victory too far, one assumption too bold? Noah seemed to sense her hesitation. He took her hand, squeezing gently. "Hey, remember what you told me that first night? About how impossible is just a word?" "I remember." "So let's find out what else is negotiable," he smiled. "Besides, if you fall, I'll catch you. I've gotten pretty good at it over the past year." Lila was already bouncing impatiently ahead of them. "Come on, let's go!" They started walking, warming up Sierra's muscles the way she'd learned to do religiously. After about 5 minutes, when her legs felt loose and ready, Sierra looked at Noah. "Okay, I'm going to try now." "Start with just a few steps," Noah cautioned. "Don't—" But Sierra was already moving, her walk transitioning into a slow jog. It was awkward at first, her gait uneven, her movements careful and controlled. But she was jogging. Her feet were leaving the ground. Her legs were carrying her forward faster than a walk. And for 5 glorious seconds, she was running. Then her right leg cramped, and she stumbled. Noah caught her immediately, his arms steadying her, his face concerned. "You okay?" "I'm perfect," Sierra gasped, laughing and crying at the same time. "I ran, Noah. Did you see that? I actually ran." "I saw it." His voice was thick with emotion. "You're incredible. You know that?" "Again," Sierra said, straightening up. "I want to try again." They continued around the lake, Sierra attempting short bursts of jogging interspersed with walking. Each attempt lasted a little longer than the previous one. By the time they'd completed half the loop, she'd managed to jog for nearly 30 continuous seconds. Lila, who'd been running circles around them with the boundless energy of a 5-year-old, suddenly stopped and turned back. "Miss Sierra, you're doing it! You're really running!" The joy on the little girl's face made Sierra's chest tight. Over the past months, Lila had become such an important part of her life. They had their own routines now: Friday movie nights, Sunday morning pancake making, bedtime stories when Sierra stayed over at Noah's apartment. Sierra had even helped Lila with her kindergarten homework, discovering a patience she hadn't known she possessed. "I'm trying," Sierra called back. Want to run with me for the next part? Lila bounded back to them, taking Sierra's hand. Together they jogged slowly down the path, Noah keeping pace beside them, ready to catch Sierra if needed, but giving her space to find her own rhythm. They made it another 50 yards before Sierra had to stop, her legs shaking with exhaustion. But she was grinning so widely her face hurt. That was amazing, Noah said, pulling her into a hug. Absolutely amazing. I have an idea, Sierra said, catching her breath. There's a 5K charity run next month, the one that benefits children's hospitals. What if we signed up for it? All three of us. We could walk most of it, jog when I'm able, and just finish together. Noah looked uncertain. Sierra, that's ambitious. A 5K is over 3 miles. Are you sure you're ready? I don't know if I'm ready, but I know I want to try. And I know I want to do it with both of you beside me. She looked down at Lila. What do you think? Want to do a race with us? Yes! Lila jumped up and down. Can I get a special shirt? Race people always have special shirts. We'll get matching shirts, Sierra promised. Team Unstoppable. Noah laughed. Team Unstoppable? That's pretty cheesy. It's perfect, Sierra insisted, because that's what we are. A year ago I was told I'd never walk again. Now I'm planning to run a 5K. That's the definition of unstoppable. Over the next month, Sierra trained religiously. She worked with a professional physical therapist 3 times a week, continued her exercises with Noah, and gradually built up her endurance. The progress was slower than she wanted. Some days she could barely walk, let alone run. But it was progress nonetheless. The night before the race, Sierra couldn't sleep. She lay in Noah's bed. She'd been staying over more frequently, gradually moving pieces of her life into his small apartment, staring at the ceiling and worrying about everything that could go wrong. You're thinking too loud, Noah mumbled beside her. I can hear your brain racing from here. Sorry, Sierra whispered. I'm just nervous about tomorrow. Noah rolled over to face her, his hand finding hers in the darkness. Talk to me. What are you really worried about? What if I can't finish? What if I have to drop out halfway through and everyone sees that I'm not as recovered as I've been pretending to be? First of all, you haven't been pretending anything. You are recovered. Maybe not 100%, maybe never 100%, but recovered enough to live a full life. Noah's thumb traced circles on her palm. And second, who cares if you don't finish? The victory isn't crossing some arbitrary finish line. The victory is showing up. It's trying. It's being willing to risk failure because the possibility of success is worth it. When did you become so wise? Around the time I met a stubborn CEO who refused to accept that impossible meant impossible. He pulled her closer. Sierra, tomorrow you're going to wake up, put on our ridiculous matching shirts, and go to that race. And whatever happens, whether you finish or don't, whether you run or walk or crawl, I'm going to be right beside you. So is Lila, and we're going to be proud of you no matter what. I love you, Sierra said, the words coming out before she could second-guess them. They'd been dancing around the declaration for weeks, both feeling it, but neither quite brave enough to say it first. Noah went very still. Then, his voice rough with emotion, he said, I love you too. So much that it terrifies me sometimes. Why does it terrify you? Because I already lost someone I loved, and the thought of losing you, his voice broke. I know it's not rational. I know accidents happen, and life is uncertain, and we can't live in fear. But sometimes late at night, I wake up in a panic thinking about something happening to you. Sierra held him tighter. I'm not going anywhere. I mean, eventually we're all going somewhere. That's just mortality. But I'm not leaving you, Noah. Not by choice. Not if I can help it. You're stuck with me. Promise? I promise. And you're stuck with me too. You and Lila both. This is it for me. You're my family now. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, and for the first time in weeks, Sierra didn't have nightmares about falling or failing or losing everything she'd fought so hard to regain. The morning of the race was clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that felt like a gift. Sierra woke to find Lila already awake and bouncing on the bed, wearing her Team Unstoppable shirt and light-up sneakers. Race day, we're going to run so fast! Noah appeared in the doorway with coffee and bagels. Thought you might need fuel, And Lila's been up since 5 a.m., so we might need to burn off some energy before the race even starts. They arrived at the race site to find thousands of people already gathered. Families, serious runners, casual walkers, people in costumes, dogs in matching bandanas. The energy was infectious, and Sierra felt her nervousness transform into excitement. As they were pinning on their race numbers, a woman approached them. "Excuse me, are you Sierra Langford?" Sierra tensed slightly, unsure what to expect. "Yes, that's me. I just wanted to say thank you. I'm Sarah Chen. I work in your accounting department. I've been with Langford Industries for 8 years, and after your speech at the gala, I finally had the courage to ask for accommodations for my disability. I have MS, and I'd been hiding it because I was afraid of losing my job or being seen as weak. But watching you be so open about your recovery gave me courage to do the same." Sierra felt tears spring to her eyes. "I'm so glad you spoke up. Did HR help you?" "They were amazing. I got a standing desk, modified schedule, and access to the company's disability support program that I didn't even know existed. It's changed everything." Sarah glanced at Noah and Lila. "Is this your family?" "Yes," Sierra said without hesitation. "This is Noah and his daughter Lila. My family." After Sarah left, Noah squeezed Sierra's hand. "That was beautiful. Look at you, changing lives just by being honest about your own struggles. I never thought about it that way. I was so focused on my own recovery that I didn't consider how it might affect other people." "That's leadership," Noah said. "Not the kind that comes from quarterly reports or board meetings, but the kind that comes from being human and vulnerable and showing people that it's okay to need help." The race began with a blast from an air horn, and the crowd surged forward. Sierra, Noah, and Lila stayed toward the back, moving at a comfortable pace. They walked the first half mile, letting Sierra's muscles warm up properly. Then, when Sierra felt ready, she began to jog. Her pace was slow, barely faster than the walkers around them, but she was running. Her legs were moving, her feet were striking the pavement in that distinctive rhythm, and she was doing what the doctors had said was impossible. Lila ran alongside her, chattering excitedly about everything she saw: the people in funny costumes, the volunteers handing out water, the dogs participating in the race. Noah stayed close, his presence steady and reassuring, ready to help if needed, but letting Sierra push herself. They made it through the first mile before Sierra had to stop and walk. Her legs were shaking, her breathing labored, but she felt triumphant. "1 mile," she gasped. "I just ran a mile." "You're incredible," Noah said, offering her water. "Want to keep going or take a break?" "Keep going, but walking for now." They walked through the second mile, Sierra's muscles gradually recovering. By the time they reached the 2.5-mile marker, she felt ready to try running again. This time, she managed to jog for nearly a quarter mile before her legs demanded a walking break. As they approached the final stretch, Sierra could see the finish line ahead. The crowd was cheering, music was playing, and volunteers were holding up encouraging signs. She looked at Noah and Lila, both of them smiling at her with such pride and love that her chest felt tight. "Ready for the final push?" Noah asked. Sierra took Lila's hand on one side and Noah's hand on the other. "Together?" "Together," they agreed. The three of them began to run toward the finish line. Sierra's pace was slow and her gait was awkward, but she was running. After everything, the accident, the months in a wheelchair, the painful rehabilitation, the moments of despair when she'd wanted to give up, she was running across a finish line with the two people she loved most in the world. When they crossed the line, Sierra's legs immediately gave out, and she collapsed onto the grass beyond the finish area. Noah and Lila collapsed beside her, all three of them laughing and gasping for breath. "We did it!" Lila shouted. "We ran the whole race!" "We did," Sierra agreed, pulling the little girl into a hug. "We really did." A volunteer came over with water bottles and medals, cheap plastic things that probably cost $1 to make. But Sierra clutched hers like it was Olympic gold. "Congratulations on finishing," the volunteer said. Then recognizing Sierra, she added, "Ms. Langford, it's an honor. My daughter was treated at Children's Hospital last year. Thank you for supporting this cause." After the volunteer left, Sierra lay back on the grass, staring up at the blue sky, feeling utterly exhausted and completely alive. Noah lay beside her, their hands linked, while Lila ran off to get cookies from the refreshment tent. "I need to tell you something," Sierra said. "Okay." "I've been thinking about the company, about my role there, about what I want the next chapter of my life to look like." She turned her head to look at him. "I'm stepping back." Noah propped himself up on his elbow, surprised. "What do you mean?" "Not stepping down entirely, but I'm moving to an executive chairman role. Wilson will become CEO. I'll still be involved in major decisions, still guide strategy, but I won't be running day-to-day operations anymore." Sierra sat up, her eyes bright with certainty. "I spent 15 years building that company at the expense of everything else. And then I spent a year learning what actually matters. I don't want to go back to 80-hour weeks and missing the moments that count." "Sierra, you don't have to do this for me. I never asked you to." "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. For us. For the life I want to build that includes more than just work." She squeezed his hand. "I want to be present for Lila's school plays and soccer games. I want to have dinner with you more than twice a week. I want to travel and volunteer, and maybe even sit still for longer than 5 minutes without feeling guilty about it." Noah was quiet for a long moment. "Are you sure? You've worked so hard to build Langford Industries. I don't want you to resent giving it up." "I'm not giving it up. I'm redefining what success means to me. For years I measured my worth by how much I could accomplish, how hard I could work, how high I could climb. But the accident taught me something crucial. None of that matters if you don't have people to share it with. None of it means anything if you're too busy climbing to notice the view." Lila ran back with cookies for all of them, and they sat together on the grass, eating and watching other runners cross the finish line. After a while, Lila asked, "Miss Sierra, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetie." "Are you going to marry my daddy?" Noah choked on his cookie. "Lila, you can't just ask people that." But Sierra was laughing. "You know what? That's a very good question." She looked at Noah, her expression suddenly serious. "What do you think? Should I marry your daddy?" Noah's eyes were wide. "Sierra, you don't have to. This isn't. We haven't even talked about. I'm talking about it now." Sierra's voice was steady, certain. "I love you, Noah. I love Lila. I love the life we're building together. And I want to make it official. So yes, Lila, I would very much like to marry your daddy. If he'll have me." "Is that a proposal?" Noah asked, his voice strange. "I guess it is. I'm proposing to you in the middle of a park, covered in sweat, eating a cheap cookie, with your 5-year-old daughter as a witness. It's probably the least romantic proposal in history, but it's honest and real and very us." Noah started laughing, then crying, then both at once. "Yes, God, yes, of course I'll marry you." Lila squealed and threw her arms around both of them. "We're going to be a real family. Can I be in the wedding? Can I wear a fancy dress? Can we have cake?" "You can absolutely be in the wedding," Sierra promised. "The most important person in the wedding, actually. What do you think about being our flower girl?" "What's a flower girl?" "Someone who walks down the aisle throwing flower petals and looking adorable. Think you can handle that?" "I can be so adorable," Lila said seriously. "I'm adorable every day. Daddy says so." They stayed in the park for hours, lying on the grass and talking about the future, about wedding plans and honeymoons and whether they'd live in Sierra's penthouse or Noah's apartment or find something new that was truly theirs. They talked about Lila's school and Sierra's transition at work and whether they might want to have more children someday. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Sierra felt a profound sense of peace. A year ago, she'd been at the lowest point of her life, sitting alone in a wheelchair, convinced that her story was over. But it hadn't been over. It had just been the end of one chapter and the beginning of something entirely new. She'd learned that strength wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up. That asking for help wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. That the people who saw you at your worst and loved you anyway were the people worth keeping in your life. 6 months later, Sierra stood at the altar in a small garden ceremony, her legs steady beneath her, wearing a simple white dress and no shoes, her one concession to the practical reality that heels were still a challenge. Noah stood across from her in a suit that actually fit properly, his eyes bright with tears, while Lila stood between them in a princess dress, clutching a basket of flower petals. The guest list was small. Wilson and a few close executives from Langford Industries, Marcus and Maria, and other friends who'd supported Noah through his darkest days, Sierra's parents who'd flown in from the East Coast still looking somewhat bewildered by their daughter's unconventional choice of partner, and a handful of others who mattered. As the officiant spoke about love and commitment and the courage it takes to build a life together, Sierra thought about the journey that had brought them here. The accident that had seemed like an ending, but had actually been a beginning. The night Noah had walked into her office and refused to let her give up. The months of painful rehabilitation that had transformed not just her body, but her entire understanding of what mattered in life. Do you, Sierra Langford, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Sierra looked at Noah, at this man who'd seen her broken and called her strong, who'd challenged her to redefine impossible, who'd shown her that true partnership meant supporting each other through every fall and celebrating every victory, no matter how small. I do, she said, her voice clear and certain. And do you, Noah Brandt, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Noah's smile was radiant. I absolutely do. Well, then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. They kissed while Lila threw flower petals with wild enthusiasm, showering them in a storm of pink and white. The small crowd applauded, and Sierra felt Noah's arms around her, solid and real and home. At the reception afterward, held in the same garden, Sierra found herself surrounded by well-wishers. But the moment that mattered most came when Sarah Chen, the woman from accounting who'd spoken to Sierra at the race, approached with tears in her eyes. I just wanted to thank you again, Sarah said. Not just for the accommodations at work, but for everything you represent. You showed me that disability doesn't mean inability, that asking for help is brave, not weak, that we can redefine success on our own terms. You did that yourself, Sierra said. I just showed up and was honest about my own struggles. You're the one who had the courage to ask for what you needed. Maybe, Sarah smiled, but sometimes we need to see someone else do it first before we have the courage to do it ourselves. So thank you for going first. After Sarah left, Wilson approached with a glass of champagne. Congratulations, Sierra, on the marriage, on the career transition, on everything. You've really found your balance. I have, Sierra agreed, though it took losing everything to figure out what balance actually meant. The company's in good hands with you as chair, and more importantly, you're in good hands here. Wilson gestured to where Noah was teaching Lila an elaborate dance move that involved a lot of spinning. He's good for you, they both are. They're everything, Sierra said simply. As the evening deepened and the party began to wind down, Sierra and Noah slipped away to a quiet corner of the garden. Lila had fallen asleep on Marcus's lap, exhausted from being the center of attention all day. So, Noah said, pulling Sierra close, how does it feel to be Mrs. Brandt? Technically, I'm keeping Langford professionally, but personally, Sierra smiled. It feels perfect, absolutely perfect. Any regrets? About the career change, about tying yourself to a former janitor and his daughter, about any of it? Sierra thought about the question seriously. A year ago, even 6 months ago, she might have had doubts, might have worried about what she was giving up, what compromises she was making, whether she was sacrificing too much of herself for this relationship. But now, standing in this garden with the man she loved and his daughter sleeping peacefully nearby, Sierra knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Not because work didn't matter, it still did, but because she'd finally learned that work was just one part of a full life, not the entirety of it. No regrets, she said. Not a single one. You know what I've been thinking about? What? That first night you walked into my office, when you knelt beside my wheelchair and said you'd help me walk. Do you remember what I said? You laughed at me. Then you cried. I cried because for the first time in months, someone looked at me and saw possibility instead of limitation. You didn't see a broken CEO or a tragedy or a cautionary tale. You saw someone who could be helped, someone worth helping. Sierra's voice was thick with emotion. You saved my life that night, Noah. Not dramatically, not like in the movies, but in the real, everyday way that actually matters. You showed up. You stayed. You refused to let me give up on myself. You did the work, Noah insisted. I just reminded you that you could. We both did the work. That's what partnership means, isn't it? Showing up for each other, catching each other when we fall, believing in each other when belief seems foolish. She kissed him softly. Thank you for being my partner. In recovery, in life, in everything. They stood together in the quiet garden, the music and laughter of the reception fading into background noise, both aware that they were at the beginning of something new. Not the fairy tale ending where everything became perfect and easy, but the real kind of beginning where two people chose each other fully, flaws and complications and all. A year later, Sierra stood at a podium in front of 500 people at a disability rights conference. She was there as keynote speaker, invited to discuss her experience with recovery and reintegration into professional life. But as she looked out at the audience, people in wheelchairs, people with prosthetics, people with invisible disabilities, people who were fighting battles that most of the world would never see, she knew she needed to tell them the truth. A year and a half ago, Sierra began, I was told I would never walk again. The medical consensus was unanimous, the prognosis was clear, and I believed it. I spent 6 months in a wheelchair, convinced that my life as I'd known it was over. And in many ways it was, but not in the way I thought. She paused, making eye contact with individuals throughout the audience. My life wasn't ending, it was transforming. The accident didn't destroy me, it revealed me. It stripped away everything I'd used to define myself, my mobility, my independence, my carefully constructed image of invincibility, and forced me to figure out who I was underneath all of that. Sierra took a breath, feeling the weight of vulnerability that came with public honesty. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that positive thinking and determination will cure any disability. That's not true, and it's actually harmful to suggest it. Some disabilities are permanent. Some conditions don't improve no matter how hard you work. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Disability doesn't make you less valuable, less worthy, or less whole as a human being. She could see people nodding, leaning forward, really listening. What I'm going to tell you is this. Whatever your circumstances, you have the right to ask for help. You have the right to accommodations. You have the right to take up space and demand accessibility and refuse to apologize for needing what you need. Because asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's recognizing that we're all interdependent, that none of us succeeds alone, that community and support are what make us human. Sierra glanced at the front row, where Noah sat holding Lila, who was almost 6 now and fidgeting in her seat. Beside them sat Sarah Chen and 3 other Langford Industries employees who'd come forward after Sierra's gala speech to request accommodations for their own disabilities. I was lucky, Sierra continued. I had access to excellent medical care, financial resources to support my recovery, and someone who refused to let me give up. Not everyone has those advantages, and that's why advocacy matters. That's why we need to keep pushing for better accessibility, better accommodations, better recognition that disability is a natural part of human diversity. She concluded her speech with a challenge to the audience. Whatever impossible looks like in your life, whether it's walking again or finding employment or just getting through the day, I want you to remember that impossible is negotiable. Maybe not in the way you expect, maybe not on the timeline you hope for, but somehow. And while you're negotiating with impossible, I want you to remember that you don't have to do it alone. Find your people, build your community, accept help when it's offered, and ask for it when it's not. Because that's not giving up, that's fighting smart. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, person after person approached Sierra to share their own stories of struggle and recovery, of setbacks and victories, of learning to navigate a world that wasn't always designed for their needs. Sierra listened to each one, offered what encouragement she could, and felt humbled by their courage. That evening, back at the home Sierra and Noah had bought together, a single-story house with wide doorways and no stairs, designed with accessibility in mind even though Sierra rarely needed accommodations anymore. They sat on the back patio watching Lila chase fireflies in the yard. You were amazing today, Noah said, his arm around Sierra's shoulders. The way you spoke to that audience, the honesty, the vulnerability, it was powerful. I just told the truth, that's all I can ever do. The truth is revolutionary, Noah replied, especially when it comes from someone with your platform. You're changing minds, Sierra. You're showing people that success and disability aren't mutually exclusive. Sierra leaned into him, watching Lila's joyful pursuit of the glowing insects. Do you ever think about that first night when you walked into my office? All the time. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't? If you just walked past, kept cleaning, gone home? Noah was quiet for a moment. I think you would have found your way eventually. Maybe not as quickly, maybe not in the same way, but you're too strong to stay down permanently. I'm not so sure about that. I was in a pretty dark place. But you're not anymore, and neither am I. Noah kissed the top of her head. We saved each other, Sierra. You gave my life meaning beyond just surviving. You showed me that it's possible to love again after loss. You gave Lila a mother figure who loves her unconditionally. That's not nothing. No, Sierra agreed, her throat tight with emotion. That's everything. Lila ran up to them, breathless and grinning, a firefly cupped carefully in her hands. Look, I caught one. Can we keep it? We have to let it go, sweetheart, Noah said gently. Fireflies need to be free to fly. But I caught it fair and square. Sierra knelt down to Lila's level, still one of her favorite small victories, the ability to kneel and rise without assistance. I know you did, but sometimes the most loving thing we can do is let beautiful things be free. Watch. She helped Lila open her hands, and together they watched the firefly orient itself, test its wings, and then take flight, joining the constellation of glowing insects dancing through the evening air. See, Sierra said. Now it can do what it was meant to do, and we get to watch and appreciate its beauty without owning it. Lila thought about this for a moment, then nodded. Okay, but can we catch another one? As Lila ran back into the yard, Noah pulled Sierra to her feet and into his arms. That was profound. The metaphor about letting things be free. I learned it from you, Sierra said. You never tried to cage me or limit me or make me smaller to fit into your life. You let me be exactly who I was and loved me anyway. That's because who you are is extraordinary. They stood together in the gathering darkness, watching Lila chase fireflies, listening to the summer insects sing their evening songs, feeling the weight of their joined hands and the warmth of shared breath and the profound rightness of this moment. Sierra thought about the long road that had brought them here, through accident and recovery, through despair and hope, through the painful process of learning to walk again, both literally and metaphorically. She thought about the woman she'd been before the accident, so focused on professional success that she'd forgotten to build a personal life. And she thought about who she'd become, not despite the accident, but because of it and everything that came after. I wouldn't change it, she said suddenly. Change what? Any of it. The accident, the recovery, all of it. I know that's probably terrible to say. I know I should wish it had never happened, but if I could go back and prevent the accident, I'm not sure I would. Because then I wouldn't have this. I wouldn't have you and Lila. I wouldn't have learned the things I needed to learn about what actually matters in life. Noah was quiet, understanding the weight of what she was saying. That's not terrible. That's just honest. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things in our lives. Not because the trauma was good, but because we're capable of growing from it. Exactly. Sierra rested her head against his shoulder. I'm grateful for the woman I've become, even if I had to break completely to become her. Later that night, after Lila was asleep and the house was quiet, Sierra stood in front of her bathroom mirror examining the scars on her back, the reminders of 3 surgeries, countless procedures, months of invasive medical intervention. For a long time after the accident, she'd hated these scars, seeing them as evidence of her brokenness, of everything she'd lost. But now, tracing the lines with her fingers, she felt something different. These scars told a story, not of defeat, but of survival, of fighting back, of refusing to accept that impossible meant permanent. Noah appeared in the doorway, watching her. What are you thinking? That these scars are beautiful, Sierra said, not because of how they look, but because of what they represent. Every single one is proof that I survived something that should have destroyed me, that I fought my way back when everyone said I couldn't, that I built a new life from the ruins of my old one. She turned to face him. You know what the best part is? What? I'm not done fighting, not because I have to anymore, but because I choose to. I choose to keep pushing, keep growing, keep challenging myself. Not to prove anything to anyone else, but because that's who I am. Someone who sees a mountain and thinks, I wonder if I can climb that. Are you planning to climb an actual mountain? Because I should warn you, I'm not great with heights. Sierra laughed. No literal mountains, but there's a proposal on my desk at work. The board wants to launch a disability employment initiative, partnering with vocational rehabilitation programs to create pathways into corporate jobs for people with disabilities. It's ambitious and complex and probably going to be really difficult to implement. So naturally, you're excited about it. Naturally. She moved closer to him. But this time I'm doing it differently. I'm not sacrificing my personal life for professional ambitions. I'm not working 80-hour weeks or measuring my worth by how much I accomplish. I'm just showing up, doing good work, and then coming home to you and Lila. That's the real victory. Not learning to walk again, but learning to live again. Fully, completely, without apology. They stood together in the bathroom doorway, neither speaking, just being. And in that comfortable silence, Sierra felt a profound sense of completion. Not the kind that meant her story was over, but the kind that came from knowing she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The next morning, Sierra woke to Lila jumping on the bed, a weekend ritual they'd established over the past year. Wake up, wake up! Daddy's making pancakes, and he said I could help. Sierra groaned playfully. It's 7 a.m. on a Saturday, Lila. Don't you ever sleep in? Sleeping is boring. Living is exciting. Lila bounced harder. Come on, Miss Sierra. Mommy Sierra. Come help us make pancakes. Sierra's heart caught on the name. Lila had started tentatively calling her Mommy Sierra a few months ago, a compromise that honored Jennifer's memory while acknowledging Sierra's present role. Each time she heard it, Sierra felt the weight of that responsibility and the joy of that acceptance in equal measure. Okay, I'm up. Sierra swung her legs out of bed, planted her feet on the floor, and stood up, a simple movement that she would never again take for granted. Let's go make some pancakes. In the kitchen, Noah was already mixing batter while Lila arranged chocolate chips in elaborate patterns on the counter. Sierra came up behind Noah, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her cheek against his back. Good morning, she murmured. Good morning, he replied, turning to kiss her. Sleep well? Best sleep of my life. I have this theory that happiness makes for better rest. Scientifically sound theory. Noah handed her a spatula. Want to help? Lila's in charge of chocolate chip distribution. I'm on batter duty, and you can handle the actual cooking. They worked together in easy harmony, the kitchen filling with the smell of pancakes and the sound of Lila's chatter. This, Sierra thought, this was what success actually looked like. Not corner offices or quarterly reports or industry recognition, though those had their place. But this, making breakfast with her family on a Saturday morning, Lila's laughter echoing through their home, Noah's steady presence beside her. This was everything. After breakfast, they decided to go back to the park where Sierra had run her first 5K. It had become a special place for them, a reminder of how far they'd come. As they walked the familiar path, Sierra found herself thinking about all the people who'd been part of her journey, the doctors who'd helped her recover, the board members who'd supported her transition, the employees who'd shown up every day even when leadership was uncertain, Sarah Chen and others who'd been brave enough to ask for accommodations, and Marcus and Maria who'd been Noah's village through his darkest days. Penny for your thoughts? Noah asked. I'm just grateful, Sierra said simply. For all of it. For every person who played a part in getting me here. For you, most of all. For refusing to walk past a woman in a wheelchair crying alone in her office one random night. Best decision I ever made, Noah said. Well, second best. First best was saying yes when you proposed to me at this very park. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, Lila running ahead and then circling back full of endless energy. When they reached the spot where Sierra had finished her first 5K, she stopped. I want to try something, she said. Okay. Sierra stretched quickly, then without any fanfare or build-up, she started running. Not jogging, not the careful, controlled movements of early recovery, but actually running. Her form wasn't perfect and her pace wasn't fast, but she ran the full length of the straightaway, probably a quarter mile, before stopping, breathing hard but triumphant. "Still got it," Noah said, grinning. "Still got it," Sierra agreed. As they turned to walk back home, Lila skipping between them, holding both their hands, Sierra felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. Her life hadn't turned out the way she'd planned. The accident had demolished her carefully constructed future and forced her to build something entirely new from the wreckage. But what she'd built was better than anything she'd planned, more real, more honest, more full. She'd learned that impossible was negotiable, that strength and vulnerability weren't opposites, that the people who saw you at your worst and loved you anyway were the ones worth keeping in your life, that success wasn't about climbing mountains alone, it was about having people to climb with you, people to catch you when you fell, people to celebrate with you when you reached the summit. And most importantly, she'd learned that sometimes you had to lose everything to discover what actually mattered, that the worst thing that ever happened to you could become the catalyst for the best thing, that endings were just beginnings in disguise. A year ago, she'd been a woman in a wheelchair who'd given up on walking. Today, she was a woman who'd learned to run, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, completely. She'd learned to run toward love instead of away from vulnerability, to run toward connection instead of hiding behind professional success, to run toward a life that was messy and complicated and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. And she'd learned all of it from a janitor who'd knelt beside her wheelchair one cold November night and whispered the words that would change everything. "I'll help you walk." She'd walked. More than that, she'd soared. And she was still going, one step, one day, one impossible made possible at a time, with Noah beside her and Lila's hand in hers, and a future stretching out before them full of possibility and promise and joy. The woman who'd been told she'd never walk again was running, and she had no intention of ever stopping.